Hi, everybody. We're live. That's it, huh? That's the show? Well, that was fast. Thanks for listening, everybody, and we'll talk to you next week.
Did Casey just disappear?
I don't know. What happened?
Right, he just muted himself. He's moving the cursor around. Type to us, Casey. Tell us. Are you here, Casey? Spirits, are you listening?
What?
God damn it. Am I here now?
Yes.
Jesus Christ. I've been talking for the last 2 minutes. This is user error.
What happened?
The recording is fine.
You got to
The recording is fine. The recording is fine, Marco. The recording is fine. Jesus Christ. This is the most Casey moment I've had in a little while.
You got to tell us.
The funny thing is, I had said to Marco before we recorded, before John was even on the call, I'm feeling a little overwhelmed. I have no reason for it. I just am. Well, no reason other than gestures wildly, but I'm feeling a little overwhelmed. Anyways, so my ritual when I start recording is, I don't know why this is, but I need to go into system preferences. We talked about this like months ago. I need to go into system preferences, need to go into sound, and I need to change the input to my bespoke input for the USB MixPre 3.2. Otherwise, if I don't do that, when I hit record in Audio Hijack is like, what MixPre 3.2? It doesn't exist. It exists up until I hit record, and the moment I hit record, it doesn't exist. So every time I record, I go into system preferences, sound, input.
System settings is what it's called. Now, why are you going into there instead of, you love menu bar icons. You could put a menu bar icon that will let you pick the input source.
Can you?
Yeah, right?
How? I don't know. I mean, you're probably right. I have no idea how, but it doesn't matter. So anyway, so this time I did it for MixPre 3.2, which is the physical connection to the MixPre 3. But what I should have done is, and there was a reason for this that during the the USB pre days, that Marco, for good reason, had me set up a loopback interface for when I record. And I think it was because I was piping y'all's audio back to you for some strange reason. I don't recall why
it was probably because the setup I do with USB Pre 2 is I have channel 2 being what you two are saying. And that way, in my recording, I have both me and you two, both as a backup and also to help me sync up with the with the double ender method afterwards.
Right. So anyways, I'd selected MixPre 3.2. I did not select USB MixPre 3.2 for Zoom, which is the loopback one. And as soon as I selected that, you guys could finally hear me. That's all right. I was realizing as this was happening, and I didn't realize you couldn't hear me, that I wasn't sure which one of the two pre-show.
What was that?
Oh, no. Casey, come back to us.
Oh, jeez. What?
10-4, good buddy.
What is happening? Am I here?
You just did like a robot fade out. It was like,
what the hell is going on?
Are you using third-party RAM somehow?
I know. I hate everything. You're all fired. You're all fired, and I quit.
Has there been any liquid incursion into this computer?
No. All right.
Don't touch anything. Just talk and don't touch anything with your hands.
Okay, so we are recording on Monday, March 31st for travel-related reasons, and we really wanted to call attention to the fact that today is Trans Day of Visibility. So happy Trans Day of Visibility. I'm not sure if that's really the appropriate way of phrasing it, but this is meant in good spirits, and I hope you take what we mean and what I mean by saying this. So if you're not familiar or aware of this, we will put a link in the show notes, but reading from GLAAD's website, each year on March 31st, the world observes Transgender Day of Visibility, or TDOV, to raise awareness about transgender people. It is a day to celebrate the lives and contributions of trans people while also drawing attention to the disproportionate levels of poverty, discrimination, and violence the community faces. I'm pretty darn sure I can speak for all three of us. In fact, I am sure I can speak for all three of us in saying trans people are people. Trans people deserve to be loved and treated and have the rights of any other kind of person. Trans rights are human rights, and to think otherwise is preposterous and disgusting. And if you do feel otherwise, you can feel free to turn the program off right now because this program is not for you if that's how you feel. So to those of you who identify as transgender, we are here with you to the degree that three straight white old dudes can, and we support you to the degree that we can, and we believe in you and hope the best for all of you. And if either of you two have something to add, I am all ears.
Yeah, this is kind of the name of this holiday is kind of a statement about where things are right now. It's like Trans Day of Visibility. Like, what do they want? What's their agenda? See us. Allow us to exist and have rights. And like, if you're my age or older, you might remember a time when lots of different types of people faced similar discrimination, as in, it would be more convenient for me as the default human to not have to think about people who are different than me. So can't they just like hide themselves or stay in the closet or whatever? And then I wouldn't have to think about them, and it would make me feel so much more comfortable. There's no such thing as a world without trans people in it. There's no such thing as a world without gay people in it. And the sooner you realize that, the sooner you can get on board with the idea of like, maybe other human beings exist. And it's a journey for a lot of people, especially if you didn't grow up thinking about this at all. But I have some confidence that everybody listening to this, if they're not already on board, can eventually get on board by just slowly breaking it down and thinking, people exist. I should recognize them as people. It's as simple as that.
Basically, like, don't be a jerk. Let people be who they are. Call people what they want to be called. If you are not trans, the existence of trans people doesn't threaten you or make your life worse in any way. There is no reason to deny people rights or deny people safety and dignity. And, don't be a jerk. Call people what they want to be called, and it doesn't affect you at all.
People come up with reasons, though. I mean, it wasn't so long ago that, women want to vote? Are women people? Black people? Are they people? Gay people? Oh, that's too far. Gay people? You've got to be kidding me. In every generation and every year, some other group of formerly oppressed people tries to fight for their rights, and other people resist it because it just doesn't seem like that's the way things should be. But guess what? They're always wrong.
Yep, every single time. So anyway, if this phrasing is incorrect or inappropriate, I genuinely apologize. But to the degree that I don't know the right way to phrase it, happy Trans Day of Visibility. And again, you are visible to us. John, it is time for your favorite corner. It is Recognizing Past Events Corner. On the 30th of March in 2022, a monumentous thing happened. John, happy anniversary of Indie Life.
Oh, really?
Yes.
I don't know. Is this on your calendar or not on
yes.
mine?
Well, it's not on the calendar. It's on
what
my
are we celebrating?
reminder.
Are we celebrating the day I announced it on the podcast? Are we celebrating the day the podcast that I announced it on was published? What's we celebrating here?
How did I phrase this on Due? Now I need to go back and look. I think I phrased it as John announced independence. John announced...
John announced post?
Yes, there was a blog post and the recording of episode 476. My reminder and due for every March 29th at 7:50 to give me a little bit of time to get ahead of it is John announced independence on 476 on 30 March 2022. And I re-listened to the after show of that episode, and it is so freaking delightful because as much as I hate you for keeping this from Marco and me until it had already happened and you are already past your 2-week notice, it made for a truly delightful after show. And I was sitting at Wegmans this morning where I typically go to do my ATP prep, and I was beaming from ear to ear listening to Marco and I just lose our minds over the fact that you had not only quit your job but had done it 2 weeks prior. We had no idea. If you recall, you actually posted the blog post during recording. You had presumably queued it up and so on and so forth, and then actually hit go during recording because you said, there's a blog post about it. Marco and I were like, there is? And you said, yes, I just posted it. So episode 476 will be a link in the show notes. It's the after show of that episode. There's chapter markers and so on. But congratulations, John. 3 years is a great achievement, and I'm very proud of you and very excited for it.
I was just doing the math wrong on my head and said, boy, I've been independent for 2 years now.
No, 3 years, John. 2022.
Thank you for saving me from saying that on the show. It's interesting. Like a lot of these stories about people going independent, like the day, the moment or the day or the time or the date that I might celebrate is always going to be different from like the day that, like, you're picking like the announcement day on the podcast or whatever. It's like Mike Hurley's story with his shoelace breaking and him thinking, if I buy another pair of shoelaces, I'll just, it'll just continue the cycle of going back to my jobby job. I need to just not do this so I don't have to wear dress shoes anymore. I'll become a full-time podcaster. I bet the most important date for him is the day that shoelace broke. It's like the day a decision was made. And for me, maybe it would be like the day I decided I'm going to quit, or the day that I like put in my 2 weeks notice, something like that would be, that's the one that's significant to me. So which is why I can never remember like the day after keeping this secret for multiple weeks, I announced it on a podcast. But it was a fun episode. And if you want to know how I posted on my podcast, the most recent member special will tell you. Ran a Perl script that runs rsync, and it was a mess. Anyway.
Oh my gosh. Well done, John. Yeah. So if you want to hear that members episode and support John's independence, atp.fm/join. But no, truly, if you haven't heard episode 476, or even if you were around for it, 3 years ago, almost to the day, it is worth a quick re-listen. I think it was like 25, 30 minutes in the after show. And this jerk made us go through an entire episode like nothing had changed and then drops this on us in the after show. It was delightful, and I still slightly hate you for it. But I wanted to recognize it, and so happy third anniversary of independence, John.
Yes, big congratulations. And also, thank you for quitting your job, because it made you do a whole bunch of stuff for the podcast
that very true.
We weren't doing before. We talked a little bit about this before, listeners, but when John, since John quit his job, the podcast became John's job. And he has been doing so much work behind the scenes, on the CMS, on the membership system, on all these different technical things, member support issues, merchandise development, and there's so much that John has done since then. Stuff that Casey or I either kind of had on our back burners or never even would have thought to do, and either way weren't doing. So John has been having an unemployed John fully deployed on our project here has been really quite something.
It's been a boon for the podcast. So for Marco and I, this has been excellent.
I always did the merch, first of all. And second of all, I also wrote 3 apps.
But that doesn't affect John. Yeah. That doesn't affect Marco and me. What we care about is ATP.
I mean, we also want to thank you for writing those 3 apps, because it gave us a bunch of content for the show.
Also true. No, actually, it's funny hearing you discuss, because I was giving you a lot of, stick about, well, what are you going to do? What are you going to do? What are you going to do? And you had started to say, well, I might write an app or something like that. And, having come to this episode not too long after the release of Hyperspace, it was quite delightful to hear, your expectations, which, to be fair, were mostly met as far as I'm concerned. But it was funny to listen back to it. So again, if you have, 25 minutes to kill, I strongly suggest listening back to that after show. It is one of the most delightful segments I think ATP has ever done. And so as is my job, I wanted to recognize it. So thank you for indulging me.
Yeah, and just for listeners who are wondering, hey, how's it been going? It's been going fine. I'm so cautious in these type of things that I didn't feel like I was in a position to quit my job until I was sure that even if things went disastrously wrong, I would still be mostly okay. And things haven't gone disastrously wrong. They've gone about as well as I can expect, and I had prepared for everything that was coming. And obviously, everything about my income in my life has been scaled back slightly, but that was expected. So it's been going the way I thought it was. And I just, do I recommend other people do this? When it feels right to you, you'll know. For Mike, it was his shoelace breaking. For me, I don't remember what it was, but I knew when it was time. For my own reasons, and that's how it is for everybody. I think everybody has their own time and their own reasons, and you'll know when it's time.
Yep. I knew the moment I was handed the plans for this vessel. Anyways, all right, let's do some follow-up. It is Vision Pro Corner. I definitely feel like this was news to me, but a ton of people wrote in. In fact, if you ever want to know who owns a Vision Pro, just say something inaccurate about it on ATP and they'll let you know. But friend of the show, D. Griffin Jones, wrote in. This was with regard to Marco and I both lamenting how difficult it is to change the volume on the Vision Pro. I had said that what I like to do is if you look at the back of your hand, you get, I forget what it is, and then you flip your hand over and you get Control Center or link to Control Center. And then you can pinch laterally to control the volume. The standard way of doing this is if you twist the digital crown, and then there's 2 little orbs that pop up. One is for immersion level and one is for volume. So you have to twist the digital crown, look over to the volume immersion or the volume orb. And then as you continue to twist the digital crown, you'll adjust the volume. D. Griffin Jones wrote, as of Vision OS 2, there's a setting to make the digital crown adjust the volume by default rather than the environment. This is in settings, digital crown. And we also had somebody write in, Victor Prieto wrote in with a link to the support guide, if I'm not mistaken, or maybe it was a screen capture, I forget what. But anyways, between the two of them, we appreciate your service. And yeah, I will probably be doing that the next time I put my Vision Pro on. So there you go.
Every time we talk about this topic, I'm reminded of a clip I saw from, I think, an Irish stand-up comedian, a clip I saw on YouTube talking about how panicked the people, his parents would get if they left the house and they left the immersion on. The immersion, you left that, I can't do the accent, left the immersion on. It's so upsetting. And every time you can dial in the immersion, you can turn off the immersion. I keep thinking of, do either of you have any idea what immersion means in the context of a stand-up comedian saying that you left it on before you left the house?
Is it like an oven or something? I have no idea what you're talking about.
Yeah, right? I mean, I don't know.
My understanding is that it is a thing inside a giant tank of water that gets hot. It's immersed in the tank of water, and so that's how they make the hot water. They turn this thing on. It's like an electric heating element.
Like a sous vide?
Like, no, for like the hot water for the house to take a shower and stuff. This is like older, way back in the day, people growing up in the 70s in Ireland. We won't want to get into the giant rat water tanks in the attics of Irish houses. But anyway, don't leave the immersion on. You leave the immersion on your Vision Pro. I was afraid the house would burn down, or you'd be wasting electricity, or you'd be costing yourself money. It's hard to exactly tell what the complaint is, because obviously this was Irish stand-up comedian talking to an audience that understood what he was talking about. But anyway, don't leave the immersion on.
Yeah, don't leave it on. All right. With regard to Apple and new EU regulations or timelines or what have you, Karan J writes, working in global banking, our work prioritization basically goes, number 1, production stability. Number 2, regulatory. Number 3, literally everything else. Karan continues, a good regulator consults with the regulated entities before setting the timeline. Apple could do it by publishing a standard that third parties would need to build to. It doesn't mean that there would be any existing products which would work on day one. Tom continues, the interoperability requirements set out by the DMA were clear from the start. Despite Apple getting special treatment in the form of constant communication with lawmakers, something us ordinary citizens would never get, Apple has utterly refused to do anything to improve interoperability, for example, headphones, smartwatches, etc. Apple had years to come up with timelines or measures, but they did nothing, and now we're supposed to go easy on them because it might be hard. Apple was given opportunity to comply. Instead, they chose to knowingly and flagrantly violate the law they knew was coming. Why on earth should we care about how hard compliance is going to be for them now?
Well, so the main reason you'd care about how hard compliance is going to be to them is if you care about them eventually complying. If you don't care about them complying and instead you just want to essentially punish them for not following your earlier instructions, then that's the choice you can make. But I would imagine most parties involved, for the reasons we discussed last episode, want the end result to be Apple to comply. So that's why if you care about that, you should care how hard it is for the people to comply, because if you give them something that makes them think it's impossible, it's going to decrease the likelihood that they will comply. Some people don't care about that. Some people think Apple had its chance. They were told what they were supposed to do. They didn't do it. Now we're just into the punitive phase, and we no longer care whether they ever comply with anything. We just want them to be punished because they disobeyed. But I think most parties involved, including all of the European companies that want to be able to make products interoperate with Apple's platform so they can make money, want this to happen. The other angle is that they just want Apple to leave entirely so that European smartphone companies can spring back to life, Nokia reborn or whatever. And while that might be great and eventually happen, I think the companies that have lobbied for these regulations are companies that exist now and actually want to sell things to iPhone customers. And so they want Apple to allow that interoperability. I don't think this entire regulation was a backdoor to just chase Apple out of the EU so that currently non-existent or tiny European smartphone companies can spring up to take its place, because making a phone is hard. Even if you're just going to make an Android phone like everybody else, there's a lot of competition already. So I don't think that's a slam dunk.
Illustro writes, it's pretty clear there's been non-public communication between the EC and Apple prior to the release of this decision. See paragraph 19 of the decision text where it states, bullet, future functionalities of the P2P Wi-Fi connection include A, confidential, B, confidential. And we'll put a link to the text in the show notes. Illustro continues. So Apple has told the EU about future planned functionality of at least one of its features. To me, this shows that this decision was made with detailed knowledge of Apple's future plans. From working in the insurance industry in the EU, these types of behind-the-scenes discussions with EU regulators come with questions of how long it is expected the planned features will take to develop. And those timelines are taken into account when making such decisions, with the regulator consulting with technical experts on the feasibility of such changes. The characterization that this is a decision made by people who don't know any better is likely wrong.
So I wasn't aware of these confidential redacted things, and this actually gives me some hope that I didn't have before, that there were actually substantive discussions about timelines between the regulators and Apple. See, previously we had heard of course, Apple, we'd always say Apple's, of course, talking behind the scenes with the EU, and we just assumed that was happening, but we weren't privy to those conversations, so we never knew whether they were or not. And sometimes from the outside, it was but are they talking? Because it seems like what they say in the public makes it seem like they're not actually cooperating. But once you see something like this, where it's confidential Apple features that were clearly communicated to the EU, that Apple said, like, don't put this in your docs. Now we know for sure that they're talking, and that does give me much more faith than I had in the last episode, that perhaps the timelines that have been outlined are things that Apple has not agreed to, but like there have been discussions about them, and that helps the plausibility of those timelines. It gives me more confidence that those timelines are not entirely arbitrary, because if they had just like been yelling at each other in public and not having any kind of conversations behind the scenes except for negotiations about like, well, we think we're complying, well, we think we're not, the giant timeline they laid out was just, something you could never do without knowledge of Apple's plans. But, so maybe it's not as bad as I thought it was. Maybe those timelines are reasonable. Of course, even if they're talking behind the scenes, and even if they have some kind of agreement like, yeah, this is reasonable, as we've seen through every past thing that Apple has ever done to try to comply with the DMA, what Apple thinks is compliant is very often not what actually is compliant. So it's like, oh, we can meet those deadlines. We can do that, sure. And then the deadlines come and Apple rolls something out and say, here it is. We did it. And he's like, no, you didn't do it. It's like, all people have to do is let us audit their tax records for the rest of their lives and give us their firstborn and fill out this form and then wait an undetermined amount of time for it to see if we respond to their request to become a third-party allowed earbud manufacturer. And like they did with all the other things, often called malicious compliance, but also called Apple will never give up control if they could at all possibly help it. So we'll see how that turns out. But sort of certain knowledge or confirmation that they have been talking with Apple behind the scenes on substantive issues, like specifics of the features that they're being required to open up, as evidenced by redacted things inside the document, definitely increases the chances that what they're being asked to do is plausible.
Finally, David Shayer writes, in your discussion of how Apple might comply with EU rules to open up their platform, you didn't mention the possibility of Apple simply removing the controversial features in the EU. Apple did this in Britain, discontinuing advanced data protection rather than implement the changes Britain wanted. If Apple simply disabled AirDrop in Europe, would this comply? All parties now have the same level of access to AirDrop. None. Obviously, this works better for minor features like AirDrop than for major products like Apple Watch integration.
Yeah, so some of the things, well, first of all, the Britain thing, what they did had really no bearing on what the UK wanted. The UK wanted something that Apple will never give, so they did something different instead. But the UK still, it's like this is not what we asked for, Apple. This is another thing that you did, so fine, whatever. But this is not what we asked for. We wanted you to backdoor every phone for everybody. And we still don't know how that's turning out, by the way. We still have no idea what's going on there. Anyway, setting that aside, if it's just like disabling a feature here and there, fine. But the list of things that the EU wants Apple to open up is so long that if you removed all of them, you're really hampering the functionality of the phone. Like essentially, you wouldn't be able to use AirPods with an iPhone, like to quote unquote drop the feature, or like AirPods would only work in Bluetooth mode or something. And like the peer-to-peer wireless stuff or the payment things, like you wouldn't be able to use Apple Pay because they didn't open up the payment thing. Like, I think the list is too long for it to be feasible for Apple to comply by removing the functionality, because they'd be, damaging the functionality of their own products so much that it would become uncompetitive, I feel like.
We are sponsored this episode by Notion. There's no shortage of helpful AI tools out there these days, but usually using them means switching back and forth between all these different apps and tools. So instead of simplifying your workflow, it can just become more complicated. Unless, of course, you are in Notion. Notion combines your notes, docs, and projects into one space that's simple and beautifully designed. And you can leverage the power of AI now right inside Notion across all your notes and docs without jumping between your work and separate tools. Notion is your one place that you use to connect your teams, tools, and knowledge to empower everyone to do your most meaningful work. It's seamlessly integrated, infinitely flexible, and beautifully easy to use. And the fully integrated Notion AI helps you work faster, write better, and think bigger, doing tasks that normally take you hours in just seconds. Notion is very, very well respected. Look around, look for other podcasts, listen to reviews. You'll see Notion is used by over half of Fortune 500 companies. Teams that use Notion send less email, cancel more meetings, save time searching for their work, and reduce spending on tools. So everyone is kept on the same page and everyone saves time. You can do your best work. So it's a great platform. I've personally tried Notion and it is incredibly powerful, and it was really, really beautiful. I got to say, like, it's a very powerful platform, but they hide that power behind very good design. And so it's pleasant and easy to use. If the power's there if you want it, but it's not like, making everything too complicated in your face when you don't want it. It's a great tool. So save time, write faster, let Notion AI handle that first draft, jumpstart your brainstorms, and so much more. Try Notion for free when you go to notion.com/ATP. Once again, give Notion a free try at notion.com/ATP. Thanks to Notion for sponsoring our show.
All right, Wolf writes with regard to John Giannandrea, I don't know what's stopping JG from making progress on Siri, but clearly something is. Your suggestion that it's something about the structure of Apple makes sense to me. I will say this, I worked with JG long ago at both General Magic and later at Netscape. I knew him pretty well, and in every interaction he proved himself to be intelligent, knowledgeable, competent, inventive, and effective. Less relevant to this conversation, he's also kind and empathetic. I would work with him again in a heartbeat. But I want Siri to work. Said Wolf, for the record.
Yeah, I mean, and the problem is, like, we don't know, we don't even know if John Giannandrea was, the problem, in quotes. Like, we don't even know that. When you put people in companies, and the structure and the incentives and all the messiness that comes around, people working together, the structure itself can often be to blame. It can often just be like this dynamic between this person, this system, these people around them at this time in this company didn't work very well for some reason. And you can take that exact same person and put them in a different company or a different structure or at a different time, and they can do great. So it isn't necessarily like we don't even know if JG was the problem, but if he was, that doesn't necessarily reflect badly on him, and you could put him somewhere else, which Apple literally said they were doing. You could put him in a different context, and he could do great. And so maybe this context just didn't work very well for him, or maybe nobody could have succeeded in this context. Like maybe if you took Giannandrea's position and put anybody else in it at that time with those people, maybe nobody could have done any better than he did. We don't really know.
Finally, in follow-up, Ryan Budish writes on with regard to Apple TV stuff. On a recent episode, which at this point was like 2 months ago, you read some feedback from a listener who said they wanted Netflix integration with the Apple TV app so they could use the cross-service search functionality. I almost wrote in with the same feedback, but then I checked the app. I searched for Queer Eye, Squid Game, and The Crown, all Netflix exclusives, and they appeared in the search results with links to open in Netflix. They don't necessarily seem complete. For example, they're missing the current season of Queer Eye, but they are there.
Yeah, I think the search is actually separate from the TV integration. Like, there's various ways that you can integrate with Apple's Apple TV platform. And search is just one of them. But why would it be incomplete? Like, this is part of the difficulty of the tvOS interface are inconsistencies like this. Like the mental model that you require customers to have is too complicated. Like, you either get everybody on board and unify everything and everything's always the same and uniform, or it's not, and customers really have no idea what to expect. Like Ryan was going to write it and say, yeah, I really wish they could be integrated so they would work in search, because he just assumed they weren't integrated to search. And maybe in some point in the past they weren't, but now they are. But he had never realized that, because once you internalize that Netflix isn't part of the whole thing, you think they're not part of the whole thing. And actually they're part of search, but not part of the TV app. And it's too confusing. That, like, it's not a simplification. You're not actually providing value with an overarching interface if it doesn't actually include everything. And of course, that's all part of Netflix's strategy, which is like, deny Apple the ability to unify everything by refusing to participate, because we're such an important player that if we refuse to participate, your system can never be viewed by any customer as all-encompassing, because if it doesn't have Netflix, I mean, come on, we're a pretty big streaming service. And so far, that strategy has mostly worked to make the tvOS interface seem not as good as it could be if it really was unified. We'll see if that ever changes. This was back when this original item was from the episode where it changed accidentally somehow and then quickly changed back, and we briefly saw how it might have been, but who knows? We'll see in the future if we ever get a glimpse of that functionality again.
All right, John, as a reward for 3 years of independence, Marco and I are going to go take a nap while you tell us about some TV stuff.
Shouldn't take a nap for these things. Someday you're well, I don't know. Someday both of you are going to have to buy new TVs. Although Marco being Marco, he'll just buy it without consulting me. But I would hope Casey would buy it by asking me what he should do. And maybe if you listen to the TV segments, you'd know more about this. So anyway,
I'm actually, John, you'd be surprised. I mean, I'm in a very enviable position right now where I have been spousally greenlit for a new home TV purchase.
Ooh.
I just haven't gotten around to doing it yet because we've been busy with the restaurant. So I have, and because when we want to like wall mount it and stuff when we get it, so it'd be a bit of a project. So and I was like, right now I can't deal with that, but I will be asking you what TV I should buy, and I assume it's the Sony A95, whatever. But
no, so the new TVs are out for 2025.
Oh.
Things are kind of up in the air at this point. So you really need to give me more requirements to nail it down. Because remember, the A95L is now a 2-year-old TV. Sony didn't even launch one last year because the A95L was still the best TV that you could get last year. And this year, we don't know. They haven't launched their TVs at all, but the LG G5 this year is pretty impressive because it uses the tandem OLED from the iPad. Anyway, that's not what this item is about, but we'll talk. Maybe we can do it as an after show or an overtime or something. When you like, if you can save it for the show, we can have it back and forth. But come with your list of requirements.
All right,
and we'll talk about that. But this item here was originally a follow-up item back when we talked about CES, but it just aged out of that role. And particularly when we were talking about in like the episode after we talked about CES, the Hisense 116 UX, which was this very large, very expensive television. It was a mini LED TV, but the LED backlights were RGB backlights. So instead of just having a white backlight, it had red, green, and blue independent backlights. And if you turn them on, it's white. But if you don't turn them all on, you can make the backlight match the color that you want the pixels to be.
and to be clear, this still is not like a backlight per pixel. This is like zone coverage like we have like in all Apple modern monitors, right?
Exactly right. It's a mini LED TV, and mini LED is like, the LEDs in the backlight are small. Yeah, they're small, like maybe an inch or two square, but they're not pixels. But anyway, the big pitch here was that you got much better color volume. It's one of the weaknesses of LCD TVs. It's one of the weaknesses of every OLED TV that has WRGB pixels because it's got a white subpixel. Color volume is like, okay, so you can be real bright when everything's all white and whatever region, your brightness is. But what if it's all just red? Now how bright are you? It's like, well, yeah, because then now we're blocking light from all the subpixels. We have to turn off the white subpixel, block all the light from the white subpixel, or turn off the OLED white subpixel, or block all the light from the other color pixels. So we just let the red through. All right, so how red is the red? Well, if you have a red backlight behind a red pixel, that makes it more red than if you have a white backlight behind a red color filter or whatever. So that's the idea behind this. And the Hisense TV at CES was like supposedly $30,000 or something. And at the time I had mentioned that Sony had an RGB backlight technology years ago, back when I was looking to buy my first flat screen TV. I ended up getting a plasma, but I was also considering, I couldn't remember the brand name at the time, and now I've already forgotten what it is again, but maybe it started with a Q, some Sony LCD television back in the plasma days, and its innovation was that it had RGB backlights, that instead of just a white backlight, it had red, green, and blue backlights. Again, very chunky backlights. And those were very expensive TVs. They were more expensive than plasma, and it turns out they weren't as good as plasma, so I ended up getting a plasma. But anyway, so this is not a new thing, but apparently it has been historically proven difficult to do, and Hisense had this TV at CS, and it was $30,000. But now Sony has made an announcement that they have their own RGB backlight technology. I forget what the brand name of it is called, but anyway, they're claiming that it can go to 4,000 nits, and they're claiming that the color volume is close to QD OLED. So The Verge has a story about it here, which we'll link to. And a lot of people are really excited about this because, why would they care? Why do you want this other thing? Well, first of all, making a mini LED TV is pretty inexpensive at this point. Like, the LCD panels are a well-proven technology, and most of the innovation is happening in the backlight and the controller software. And in particular, if you want a really, really big TV, you just keep making the LCD bigger and bigger. It's really easy to make the backlight bigger. In fact, it's easier because you don't have to jam things together as close. You can make things bigger. And then the pixels also get bigger because you're just making a 4K TV. And you can print those LCD panels pretty cheaply. So if you want like a 115-inch TV, your only choice, other than like micro LED, which will cost $100,000, is a mini LED TV. You can't get an OLED that big because OLEDs are expensive and difficult to manufacture, and they just don't make them in that size. But the problem, of course, with mini LEDs is the color volume is not as good as the QD OLEDs, and also it's not per pixel light control. You have a big chunky light behind thousands and thousands of pixels, and if any one of those thousands of pixels is supposed to be lit up, you got to turn on the whole backlight behind it. There's millions of pixels and maybe thousands of backlights. But the color volume is an issue. Like that's where the Apple, Sony's A95L and the Samsung QD OLEDs are doing really well because they can produce the purest colors because QD OLEDs only have RGB subpixels and they are self-emissive, and that's all the light that's coming directly from the pixels, and you turn on and off individual pixels, and they always win the color volume test. Like whatever that Rec 2020 color volume thing that other TVs get to like 60% of, and that like the QD OLEDs get to like 80%, and the QD OLEDs can do like 100% P3, and LCD TVs struggle with that. Anyway, people were very excited about this because you get a huge TV with great color volume. And they're like, don't worry about the blooming and the backlighting. But The Verge's view on this is not quite as rosy. I'll put a link in the show notes to two YouTube videos, one from Visual Trends and one for HDTV Test. But and a lot of people are asking about this TV. Here's what it comes down to. Per pixel lighting or bust. That's it. Like any TV technology that doesn't let you control the light coming from individual pixels exactly is never going to be like the future of TV tech. I know people like it because you can make a big TV and the color volume is better and it's really bright and yada yada, but it's like, okay, let's put up a star field where everything is black except for pinpricks of white light. Oh, now it's not so good, is it? They're like, oh, but blooming, you can't even tell. The blooming is so well controlled, you'll never even notice. But like, look, if you watch these TV reviewers, there are situations with real content where you can see, oh, yeah, no, put an OLED next to it. And even if the other TV is bigger and it's brighter and it's like quote unquote better and people would prefer it, from my perspective, I care about per pixel lighting control. Like I don't have it on my computer monitor and maybe someday I will, but on a television, when you're watching TV content, that feel like should be the standard. And so unless you absolutely positively must have a television that is bigger than at this point, 83 inches, still OLED's the way to go. The scary thing about Sony and Sony talking about this and bragging about it is like people are thinking, okay, when Sony rolls out its 2025 TVs, are they not going to do an OLED as their flagship TV? Are they going to claim that this RGB backlight thing that they have is their new flagship TV because it's brighter and has better color volume? I hope not, because they're going to lose in all the TV shootout tests because they'll be brighter and they'll have better color volume, but they won't be able to handle challenging lighting situations as well as a screen with per pixel lighting control. This is quoting from The Verge, from people who actually saw this television. And Sony put it next to, I think it's a A95L. And this person said, I would say the difference in color reproduction and viewing angles were a wash at best. I generally prefer the picture from the OLED in the most challenging comparisons, and I think a lot of OLED TV owners would probably agree. That's not a ringing endorsement. It's brave of Sony to say, here it is versus our A95L. It was awarded the king of TVs when it came out. And a year later, we didn't even produce a new TV because this one's great. And we're showing it right next to our new TV. And having people from The Verge go there and look at it and go, yeah, I'd still take the A95L. Not a ringing endorsement. But we don't actually know what Sony's going to do. I haven't been following the rumors that closely. I'm just waiting for the shoe to drop and for them to reveal what they're going to consider their flagship TV. Samsung did this a little while back too, where Samsung was insisting that their flagship TVs were their LCD TVs, despite the fact that they had just produced a QD OLED TV. It's like, well, the company can say what their flagship is, but the market decides in the end, which is the best TV. So anyway, that's coming down the pipe. I think it is a boon for people who don't care about per pixel lighting control like I do, because you'll be able to get brighter, better TVs in larger sizes for less money. So thumbs up. I'm not down on this technology. By all means, continue to advance mini LED tech to get better and better. But as far as I'm concerned, right now, the top end is still per pixel lighting control and OLEDs. And this is relevant for Macs, by the way, because 2026 is the rumors that you'll get OLED Macs and OLED screens in the MacBook Pros and so on and so forth. Right now, the Macs are mini LED and the screens are amazing. Will they get better with OLED? We'll see.
Man, I can't wait for that. I love OLED so much, and I've had OLED for a while on my gaming laptop. My Razer occasionally uses OLED in its 15-inch-ish class laptops. I know why people wouldn't necessarily want it for certain reasons, but for my preferences, it's amazing. And so I very much look forward to having that in a MacBook Pro and maybe even a desktop Pro display at some point.
I don't think Apple's ready to revise desktop monitors. We got another 5 years to wait on that one, but yeah, that would be amazing. Like the real innovation here on the OLEDs, and I hope Apple does with the OLED stuff, is what they did with the iPad, tandem OLED, which we talked about when the iPad Pro was introduced. It's just basically sandwiching another light emitting layer in the OLED stack, so you drive all the light emitting layers at less power, so you have less burn-in issues. That makes so many things possible. That's why the LG G5 this year is doing so well, because LG G5 gave up the micro lens array, didn't go to QD OLED. They went to their tandem OLED tech. It's real bright. It's got better color volume. It's got per pixel lighting control. Still not as good as QD OLED and some things like viewing angle, and still not quite there in color volume, I think. But until we see all the comparison tests, like this is an annoying thing that Sony does every year. Like Samsung and LG come out with their TVs at CES, and then everyone just has to wait around to see what Sony's going to do, because there's no sense in doing a comparison of saying, what's the best TV of 2025 until all the 2025 TVs have been out. And so you're just waiting around for Sony to release theirs. And then finally, you can do the review. Okay, because the contenders are always LG, Samsung, and Sony. Let's see who has the best one. Right now, I feel like LG has the best one, but Sony hasn't shipped yet. So stay tuned.
If you were to buy a TV today, would you buy an LG, given what you just said?
I think I'd probably still get the N95L just because of the viewing angle things, and my viewing situation has lots of people off axis, including me sometimes. So that would be my choice there. But and also I don't have it's a pretty dimly lit room. I don't have a lot of bright lights on it. But the G5 may actually be the better choice for a lot of people than the A95L at this point, depending on their size preferences and viewing situation.
Are we in another situation where it's going to take somebody gifting you $100,000 to get anything but a Sony TV or anything but a Honda Accord?
I'm not brand. I had 2 Panasonic TVs before this. I am not sticking to any particular brand. I just buy the best TV. I bought the best TV available the year I bought my TV. It just so happens that in the following years, the best TV available was also a Sony, but might be an LG this year, depending on what Sony does.
We are sponsored this week by Factor. Ready to optimize your nutrition this year? Factor has chef-made gourmet meals that make eating well easy. They're dietitian approved and ready to heat and eat in just 2 minutes, so you can fuel right and feel great no matter what life throws at you. Factor meals arrive fresh and fully prepared. All you have to do is heat them up, and it's super easy to do, so you don't have to spend all this time, chopping and assembling and cooking everything. We don't always have time for that. If you have an active lifestyle, a busy lifestyle, Factor is great for that. With over 40 options across 8 dietary preferences on the menu each week, it's easy to pick the meals that you like and that are tailored to your goals. You can choose from preferences like Calorie Smart, Protein Plus, or Keto. They've actually done a new randomized controlled clinical trial with Factor Keto, with losing up to 8 pounds in 8 weeks with Factor Keto meals. Of course, these results will vary depending on diet and exercise. Factor can help you feel your best all day long. They have not only the meals, but also wholesome smoothies, breakfasts, grab-and-go snacks, juices, and more. So you can reach your goal this year with ingredients you can trust and convenience that can't be beat. I've personally tried and used Factor, and I'm really impressed by it. Best thing is it's super easy, and these are really good meals, and it's so fast. That's the part I love the best. It's so easy. So eat smart with Factor. Get started at factormeals.com/ATP50off. And use code ATP50OFF to get, you got it, 50% off your first box plus free shipping. That's code ATP50OFF at factormeals.com/ATP50OFF to get 50% off plus free shipping on your first box. Thank you so much to Factor for sponsoring our show.
All right. There's been some reports over the last few months, predominantly from Mark Gurman, of course, about various different new kinds of Apple hardware, new shapes of Apple hardware. Reading from a report that he wrote on December 15th, Apple designers are developing something akin to a giant iPad that unfolds to the size of two iPad Pros side by side. Apple's been honing the product for a couple of years now and is aiming to bring something to market around 2028. Apple's goal for a foldable device is to avoid the crease that current products have when they're in the open position, and the company has made progress on this front. Prototypes of this new product within Apple's industrial design group have a nearly invisible crease, but it's too early to tell if Apple can get rid of it altogether. Samsung, which launched its first foldable phone 5 years ago, has tried unsuccessfully to remove the crease. Apple wouldn't be the first to try such a concept. Microsoft prototyped something similar with the Courier more than a decade ago and then announced a dual-screen tablet called the Neo in 2019. The company abandoned both attempts, and the conclusion of the Neo cancellation was that consumers weren't clamoring for a dual-screen tablet. Lenovo has taken a crack at this concept as well. Its YogaBook 9i, which sells for less than $2,000, has dual 13.3-inch OLED screens that work side by side. Apple's approach would be different because it wants the screen to look like a single uninterrupted piece of glass. The Lenovo product has two displays attached by a hinge. Apple's version also would likely be more expensive. It's not yet clear what operating system the Apple computer will run.
Just pause here. I love these rumors. I know this is a while ago, and I know it's like a rumor about a thing that's going to come in 2028, but like the story, this was the origin of this item, which has been in the notes for a while. Giant thing, like two big iPads, it folds. But we don't know if it's a Mac or an iPad. It's not yet clear it's a pretty important detail, don't you think? Especially given the current state of iPad OS and the current non-touch operable state of Mac OS. There's a giant thing. It looks like two tablets folding. OS unknown. Maybe it'll run Audio OS or TV OS. Maybe it'll run Vision OS. Who knows? This is the real sort of like you're gonna see what you want to see type of rumor. I mean, I'm still looking at this and thinking, well, this just sounds like something to be toying with internally, and surely this will be canceled because they can't even nail it down to an OS. But like, if this is a Mac, a bunch of stuff has to happen between now and 2028 to make that plausible. And if it's not a Mac, then like, why all the secrecy? It's just a weird giant folding iPad. Anyway, continue.
Last week, this was again in December, a document alleging to show Apple's display plans was posted on Twitter. It indicated the iPhone maker aims to use an 18.8-inch foldable screen. Let me reread that. 18.8-inch foldable screen between 2028 and 2030. That roadmap also suggests that the MacBook Pro will switch to OLED screens in 26, with the MacBook Air following in 27. This aligns with what Mark Gurman has heard.
Yeah, so that's from December, and I think this week, like the 2026 date for OLED screens has been repeated multiple times, including very recently. So like the M6, I think by then M6-based MacBook Pros with an OLED screen, Apple's taking its sweet time rolling out these screens. And it's kind of interesting that the iPad Pro has now kind of become the technological testbed for the most advanced basic technologies. It gets I think it looks like it's going to get the M5 chip first, just like it got the M4 chip first. It got the tandem OLED, what's going to turn out to be years before they appear on Macs. It's a convenient way to roll out that tech, I guess, but it just seems weird to me that like that's the way the timelines have aligned, because I don't know how many iPad Pros they sell, but surely they sell more MacBook Pros, right? And maybe I'm wrong about that. Maybe they're just selling all MacBook Airs and they actually sell more iPad Pros than MacBook Pros. Apple doesn't break that down for us very well, so it's hard to tell. But like it seems we're out here waiting a while for OLEDs. I guess we should just be glad we've had them on the phones for so long, because they make such a difference, and on the watch for so long, because they make such a difference on those devices, and I really love them there. But tandem OLEDs, it looks great on the iPad. I love it. It would look great on a laptop. 2026.
Then Mac Rumors writes in mid to late February, another alleged leak regarding Apple's fabled foldable iPhone. We've been hearing rumors about an iPhone that folds in half for over 8 years now. While they have lacked consistency, they do suggest that Apple has tested various prototypes, with the hinge seemingly the biggest challenge Apple has been trying to overcome. Apple wants to eliminate any crease in the screen before bringing a device to market. Our latest information about Apple's foldable comes from Weibo-based leaker Digital Chat Station. And it concerns the screen measurements. According to the Chinese leaker, the device has a basically 5.5-inch outer screen that resembles the new Oppo Find N5. Yes, that is literally what the device is called, the OPPO Find N5. But it's shorter and wider. The inner screen is 7.75 inches and unfolds like an iPad. Apparently, both displays have an unprecedented aspect ratio. Apple's foldable phone will launch next year or the year after that, says the leaker. Next year or the year after that. Okay, great. Says the leaker, with the foldable iPad also expected to arrive within the same time frame.
Yeah, foldable phone things are in there. What is the common thing? Apple doesn't like creases. Apple really, really doesn't want there to be, of all the things to be hung up on. Like, I know it's bad. Like, have you ever seen someone who has these foldable phones? Like, it's hard to have it for a long time and be folding and unfolding and not have that part of the screen look and or feel not exactly the same as the flat parts of the screen. So it is a challenge, but yeah, they're folding all the things over there. It's just this entire lab of like, can we make a folding HomePod, folding Apple TV? Just if it has a screen, let's try to make a folding version of it.
And look, there is a huge benefit to if you can have a small device that then unfolds into a big screen when you want it. Like we see that in the Android flagships now that do it. And that is pretty compelling. But it does come with significant trade-offs. I mean, I think number one trade-off is these phones are very expensive when they do this. And you better believe if the Android brands are making their phones $2,000-ish to be good foldables, Apple's going to be probably even above that. So
I mean, and to be fair to the Android makers, like as evidence, because like they actually are in pretty fierce price competition with each other. They can't be that cheap because they're taking the most expensive part of the phone, which is the screen, and often tripling it because the foldable phones have 3 phone size, essentially 3 times the pixels. They have a regular screen that looks like your phone. And then when you open it up, there's inside there, the 2 halves are one continuous screen. And so just there's no way around it. It's like electric cars and batteries. Given the current cost of screen technology, you can't make a folding phone in that style that is not just so much more expensive than just a regular phone.
Yeah, exactly. And the trade-offs, it isn't just cost. There's also significant mechanical complexity. There's significant durability challenges. There's significant water resistance and dust resistance challenges because you're adding a lot more moving parts than a regular phone has. So it is significantly more difficult to make these, and there are major trade-offs in buying and owning them. But the value, if you get it right, is high. But what the rest of the computing world has done when it comes time to try to get these things to market is they kind of throw their hands up and say, well, here are all these trade-offs. We don't care. Hey, any of you out there, if you don't care either, you can buy this right now. Apple is kind of allergic to that kind of thing. Apple does not like to expose certain types of trade-offs in their released products to the world. They kind of, I think in the sense, in the context of putting out a foldable phone, they're either going to have to be very patient, or they're going to have to really hold their nose when they release something, or both. There are certain aspects about this that I would be surprised if they could overcome. They might not have overcome certain of these challenges and trade-offs, and they might just have to hold their nose eventually and say, you know what, we're going to release this anyway, even though we know this trade-off kind of hurts us to release.
Like the Vision Pro. I mean, that's kind of evidence that they are able to ship things that have trade-offs that they kind of have to hold their nose about, but they're like, you know what, we're going to ship it. I think the results kind of speak for themselves with the success of the Vision Pro, but they knew what the limitation. It was big, it was heavy, the battery life was not long. I'm sure Apple wished it could have been better. I don't know if they wish it could have been cheaper, because if it had been, a quarter of the weight and twice the resolution, I think people would be snapping them up at $3,500. But this is the current state of technology. And in the wider world of Android, where there are many, many competitors, many companies are motivated to, ship what we have, just get it out there, try it. And Apple is essentially waiting on the sidelines, letting other people iterate, letting the technology advance. Meanwhile, those companies are making money from these things because in a wide market where there's not just one company, where there's lots of different Android phone makers, there's going to be a company that says, we're going to try it. We're going to try the folding phone, and it's going to be awkward and weird, but because we're the first folding phone or the biggest or the best, we'll get some sales that are significant to us, and then we'll just keep trying. And Apple just keeps looking at it and saying it's not time for us to ship. somehow they looked at the headset market and they said, it's not time for us to ship, not time. And eventually they said, you know what? It's time. And I think they shipped a product that has exactly those compromises you were talking about, that Apple tends not to want to put out into the world, but they decided they had to do it anyway because, I don't know, they felt like they wanted to be at the forefront of this, or maybe they were scared by Meta talking about the metaverse or whatever. But yeah, they shipped the Vision Pro. So it makes me think that eventually, in a year or two, they're going to ship something foldable.
Well, and honestly, I do think they should, even though it will have those trade-offs. Like, sometimes those trade-offs, those nose-holding trade-offs, sometimes they just can't get past them. Like, for instance, I know I use this metaphor a lot sometimes, but like when you go back to when the iPad was first being rumored, and we were all talking about like, what's Apple going to do about text input? Because so far, text input on tablets kind of sucks. How do you deal with the text input? And when Apple released the iPad, they didn't deal with text input. They just punted. They're like, well, you all figure it out. Here's a mediocre solution. Good luck.
And I mean, it had an on-screen keyboard, and you could buy a hardware keyboard for it. That's what it was.
Right. And so it was two kind of hacks. It's like, well, this isn't ideal, but here are two ways you can do it anyway that both kind of work okay and have trade-offs. And the iPad was a successful product. Like nobody wasn't buying it because text input kind of sucked on it. We kind of just worked around that as a kind of an inherent limitation. Yeah, okay, text input kind of sucks on the iPad, but we still like it for reasons 1, 2, and 3 over here. So there are similar trade-offs here with folding phones. Like there are certain inherent downsides to folding phones that we might think, I wonder how Apple has solved. Maybe Apple's come up with some magical solution that. Probably not. Like typically, if a solution to a substantial like physical reality problem is not apparent to us before Apple has released a product into a category, odds are they haven't solved it either. Like if no one else has figured out how to do a good job of some kind of physical challenge here, odds are Apple hasn't either. They've just designed around it. So you look at, what will an Apple Foldable likely suffer from? High price, mechanical complexity, fragility, maybe, this is what everyone else suffer from. Apple's will probably suffer from those same things. And they will probably design with those in mind and say, okay, well, it's not going to have, the water resistance or whatever, or it's not going to have, certain, it's going to be, thick when you fold it up, and it's going to be pretty bulky, and it's going to be pretty expensive, and, but for the people who are willing to tolerate those trade-offs, here is a big foldable, it unfolds into this big screen. And I gotta say, people who have those foldable phones and who use them all the time, who aren't just gadget reviewers, tend to love them because it is like having an iPad in your pocket that you can take out and unfold whenever you want. Like it is substantially higher value for like phone-based productivity. If you want to take out your phone and work on like a document or a spreadsheet or just watch a movie or something, yeah, when you can unfold that screen into a much bigger one, that's way more valuable to you. It's really nice. And that's why people are willing, not in, massive numbers yet, but that's why some people at the high end are willing to buy these super expensive, very fragile, huge trade-off folding phones because there is that big value on the other side. And if Apple is going to have the iPhone be such an important part of their business as it is, I think they should do more crazy experiments once the market has shown like this type of thing is possible and it has a lot of utility to certain people. I think Apple, we know that they came late to the game for big screen phones. It took them a while before they got to that party because they at first thought nobody wanted that. Then it turns out Android covered it pretty well. And Apple's like, turns out everyone wants that and we're not doing it. Let's try putting out some bigger phones. And they sold like gangbusters. I don't think the folding phone phenomenon is anywhere near that big or universal. And I don't think if Apple puts one out, it's going to have anywhere near that kind of effect. But they are the world's flagship cell phone company. So if somebody else makes a really, really good kind of cell phone and Apple doesn't have something in that category and it's proving to be like a pretty good idea for certain people, I encourage them to put out experiments and to try riskier things. The iPhone, the way it is now, is very good, but kind of boring. they should put out cool stuff like that. And if other people can do it, they can do it too. And they can probably, if they put their minds to it, do a better job. So despite all of the inherent trade-offs and weirdnesses about folding phones, the fact is people use them, people love them, and they can be pretty good. So I want Apple to make one. And I'm glad whenever I hear these rumors that it seems like they're taking that seriously and will actually put one out, even though I know it will have massive trade-offs. That's the name of the game. The iPad had massive trade-offs, but I'm glad Apple released an iPad, and this is the same thing.
Yeah, I feel like a folding phone is one of those things that sitting here now, I'm like, yeah, I guess that's neat. I don't know if it would be for me or not, but I guess it's neat. And then especially, and I'm jumping ahead and I apologize, John, but John had put in the show notes a video that MKBHD did.
Don't jump ahead. You're killing me here.
Well, just it's relevant.
I know, but we can just do two more short things before we get to that.
All right, listeners, I've been told, breaking news, that I'm not allowed to jump ahead even to make a relevant point. So instead, I will plow forward as per demanded, or as it was demanded. All right, so Apple's foldable iPad Pro prototype features under-display Face ID. That's, again, iPad Pro prototype features under-display Face ID. According to the Weibo-based leaker Digital Chat Station, one of Apple's engineering prototypes features an 18.8-inch foldable screen with a, quote, metal superstructure lens, quote, that integrates the receiver and transmitter components of Face ID for under-display facial recognition.
This is one of the enabling technologies of a folding thing. One of your problems you have is now we have less room underneath the screen for stuff. And this combines with all the rumors about upcoming iPhones having things under the screen. The notch gave way to the dynamic island, which could give way to a hole punch, which Android phones have had forever. But then what do you do with Face ID? Well, maybe we can get Face ID under the screen. Maybe we can get the cameras under the screen and finally achieve the goal of a complete screen iPhone with no notch, no hole, no nothing. Anyway, Face ID might not fit behind a folding phone or even a folding iPad. I have no idea what a metal superstructure lens is, but this, how long have we been hearing about under-screen stuff? And it exists on other platforms. This is another place where Apple has been sitting it out and saying, other people are doing under-screen stuff, but their under-screen stuff isn't as good. Remember the under-screen fingerprint readers on Android phones? And Apple's like, yeah, we'll stick to Touch ID. They're still sticking with Touch ID. They don't have under-screen fingerprint readers. They use the power button on things that don't have Face ID. And cameras and other things behind the screen, same deal. They're like, oh, other people do them. Apple's not ready to go there yet. But they're still trying, I guess, and they might be forced to for a folding phone.
Then 6 things to know about Apple's upcoming foldable phone. I find this so funny because nobody knows what's going on, but apparently Mac Rumors does.
This is like a recent. So we've read a lot of articles that have been months and months ago, but this is a summary of everything that the consensus leaks about the foldable phone as of yesterday.
Right. So 6 items. Number 1, Apple wants to make it creaseless. You don't say. Number 2, it'll open like a book. And that actually is relevant because sometimes they open the other direction. So it's kind of like a tent, if you will. But no, it'll open like a book. 3, for size, imagine the iPad mini. 4, 9 to 9.5 millimeters thick when closed. 5, it might have Touch ID due to thickness limits. And 6, it will be expensive, between $2,000 and $2,500. Yikes.
Yeah, so the thickness thing of it having Touch ID. So where do they put the Touch ID? There's not enough room for a Touch ID power button at these thicknesses. Is it an under-screen Touch ID, or have they figured out some way with a middle superstructure lens to put Face ID underneath the screen of the thing? Now, finally, we come to the MKBHD video, and you can make your point, Casey.
Oh, thanks, Dad. All right, so MKBHD put up a video about this Oppo Find N5, which seems to be a very, very well-executed Android folding phone. And at a glance, I wouldn't say it looks like an iPhone or anything like that, but you can tell that it was competently done. It's very, very thin. I think MKBHD said it's roughly the same thickness as a 15 Pro or 16 Pro Max, I believe.
Well, most importantly about the thickness, because when we talk about the thickness of the phone, the most relevant thing is when it is unfolded, how thick is it? And why is that relevant? Because if the phone has a port on it of any kind, and the Oppo Find N5 does have a port, you are limited by, here it is, we talked about it years and years ago, the thickness of USB-C is the limiting factor in the thickness of the phone. Go look at the Oppo Find N5 in this video. You will see when unfolded, the USB plug plugs into one of the parts, and it is literally the thickness of a USB plug with the thinnest piece of metal above and below it. You can't make it any thinner. That's it. We're at the limit, unless you either go portless or you have some kind of like magnetically attaching dongle or thing or like. But if you want to plug a USB-C port in, Oppo's done it. They have made it. It's the thinnest stick of pot. Now they can make the other half thinner, I suppose, to remove the overall thickness. But that's something, right? And if you're wondering, like Oppo, this is a shipping product, not a prototype, not a rumor, not a thing. It's a thing that you can buy with money right now. And the beauty of it is when you do fold it up, if you're watching the video, it looks, MKBHD makes this point because he's been reviewing these Android folding phones forever. It looks almost like a regular phone. When it's folded up, you're like, it doesn't look like, because the old ones basically look like originally like two giant iPhones stuck together. Like they were huge when they were folded. Sometimes they didn't even stick all the way together because the crease, remember the one that like didn't actually close? Like the crease wouldn't close all the way as it was like teardrop shaped when it was closed. They used to be giant, but the Android folks have been working, and now the N5, it looks almost like a regular phone. And that's like, now we're getting to the territory where you look at that and you're like, okay, now Apple should feel comfortable, because if they can do that, then Apple can do that. And that means Apple can ship a folding phone that basically looks like a regular iPhone, but happens to unfold.
Yeah, and that's kind of the thesis of MKBHD's video. And, you know, as he so often is, it's very astute. And the thesis is basically, look, when it's no compromise, with the way I'm summarizing it doesn't make it sound very interesting, but he does a good job of coming up with something, or distilling the thought of, once there's no compromise, then that's when consumers will buy them. And, you know, right now it's compromise city. And as I was starting to say before I was told I was not allowed to continue, that, you know, I'm looking at this Oppo Find N5, and it, again, is extremely competently done. I'm not sure that it's something I want, but it's clearly competently done in a way that I haven't seen folding phones done previously. And I can imagine finding an Apple version of this to be quite attractive. Maybe not aesthetically, but in terms of like, I want one of these. I don't feel like I have a folding phone shaped hole in my life, but I think if this were to come out, you know, assuming the cameras aren't utterly crippled, which is tough because they might be, because, you know, each of these halves has to be so darn thin. But assuming the cameras aren't utterly crippled, I would probably get this and at least have it for a year and see what I think. And maybe I'll decide, nope, not for me. But I would definitely give it a shot, in a way that I do not plan to get the alleged 17 Air, because the camera situation is so crippled. And I'm not willing to give up the Pro cameras, whether or not I actually need them. I feel like I need them and I feel like I use them, and I'm not willing to give those up. And so if and when the 17 Air or whatever it's called arrives, I don't plan to get one because I don't want to give up the cameras. And if this does have decent cameras, then yeah, I probably will give this a try.
I mean, it's going to have worse cameras than the Air because it'll be thinner. Like the halves will be thinner than the Air, I'm assuming.
Yeah, I mean, I'm guessing it has the same camera situation as the Air.
Yeah,
it probably will.
So there's a bunch of enabling technologies you need to make this happen, right? One of them is you need enough to make this happen within the constraints that Apple usually applies to their products, right? Although again, Vision Pro is a counterexample here, but you would imagine, and the rumors are for the iPhone Air, that Apple doesn't want to massively compromise on battery life for having a thin one. The rumors about the 17, the slimmer 17, iPhone 17, is that the battery life won't be horrendously worse than the regular phones. Same thing with the Oppo Find N5. There have been advances in battery technology that allow for reasonable battery life in a phone that has 3 screens. Because first of all three screens aren't lit up all the time. At most you have, 2 screens, but it's like 3 area-wise. Anyway, you're not looking at both the back and the front at the same time, so I would imagine one of the screens is always off, and that helps. And the second, I forget, there's a new chemical formulation for batteries that helps give them higher capacity with a lower thickness. That's an enabling technology that needs to happen. Another enabling technology for Casey, to Casey's point, is if you don't want to compromise on cameras, you need some way to get decent cameras into a thin case. The rumors are that the iPhone 17 or iPhone 17 Air, or the Slim 17, is going to compromise on camera because they don't have the ability to put as good or as many cameras in such a thin phone. Foldable is going to have to be thinner than that if it's not going to be a giant chonker, thinner than the Air. The N5 compromises on cameras. It's so darn thin. Someone in the chat room said they should add a port bump. Like, yeah, you could, if you wanted to add a bump for the port, you can do that. But like, as you make the thing thinner, it makes your other problems harder. How do you deal with the camera situation? Like, oh, we can make it thinner and thinner. All right, it's great. And now when I fold it up, it's the thickness of a quote unquote regular phone. What do you do about the cameras? It's a problem because you only have half that width, or maybe you have like 3/4 of that width. It's not uniform thickness when you open it up, it's like one side is thicker than the other. But that's a problem they have to deal with. And Apple also has to deal with Face ID, which they were just talking about in that rumor about the iPad. What do you do about Face ID? Are you going to sell a phone without Face ID? Where are you going to put Touch ID? You can't put it on the edges of this thing. It's so skinny. Are you going to have under-screen Touch ID, a thing that Apple has never done or that they decided was never up to their quality standards? So there are still there's enough enabling technologies for Oppo to put out this phone that I think meets the criteria of this is almost like a normal Android phone except horrendously expensive. Battery life is okay. The screens are amazing. The size and weight is okay. It does unfold into a giant thing, but the Android world doesn't have the same standards for ubiquitous Face ID or Touch ID of the quality and security of Apple's. They've just never, that hasn't been a universal requirement. They've been willing to ship phones without Face ID, phones with fingerprint sensors that are not secure as Touch ID or whatever, because it's a bigger market. There's not one company dictating the standards. They make lots of things for lots of people. So it seems like a valid, Android phone. I don't think right now, 2025, is the right time for Apple to ship a foldable phone because I don't think enough technologies are available. And I feel kind of like the slimmer 17 is like a trial balloon. Not just a marketing test of let's test our ability to make things thinner. Let's test our thin battery technology. Test our thin camera technology, but also see, do people hate this? Are they going to be like Casey and say, oh, I would buy it, but I won't compromise on camera? That will help them decide, should we go with the foldable phone or not? Are the trade-offs desirable enough that the market the Apple market wants it? And to that end, one of the most interesting things I thought was in this video is MKBHD musing on the supposed utility of folding phones based on his personal experience. Yeah, you open it up and there's just this giant screen. He had some angles on okay, what does Android do with that giant screen? And historically, Android apps have not taken advantage of all the space available to them. It's one of the reasons Android tablets have never really caught on, because there's not a lot of development and applications to make good use of the larger screen available, even if you go from a phone all the way up to a tablet. So with folding phones, first of all, you need all of the apps to be at least aware enough that they have a much larger screen to deal with and scale to that. And second, they can't just take their phone interface and stretch it. That's not useful. Why you have the screen, why are you paying this money for so much more screen space if all you're going to do is take your existing apps and make them really wide? If anything, it might make the lines of text harder to read or something. But the second thing is, as he opens it up, it's oh, don't worry about apps. I'm going to open it up and it'll be great as a consumption device. But if it looks like an iPhone or an Android, if it just looks like a phone aspect ratio rectangle when it's folded, when you unfold it, it doesn't become an iPad mini aspect ratio. It becomes an iPad mini in terms of area, the square centimeters or whatever, but the aspect ratio is not the same. So if you watch, for example, a television or a movie, like a 16:9 or a letterbox movie on there, there's a huge amount of wasted space. He shows it in the video. It's here's an actual iPad mini showing video and I'm holding it in landscape. And here's my N5 showing a video and I'm holding it in a landscape. And the video is bigger on the iPad mini, despite the fact that they're both similarly sized, because the aspect ratio doesn't match. And if you make the aspect ratio when it's unfolded be suitable for like an iPad on its side, like watching videos on a plane or in bed at night like I do, then when you fold it, it looks really weird. It's not phone shaped anymore. It's this weird shape. So that's another kind of compromise where I'm not sure what Apple's going to do there. What's the correct size? I mean, I presume everyone wants to do what the N5 did, which is make it phone size when it's folded. But then when you unfold it, it's well, what do I do with all this space? Apple has an advantage there in that I think they'll be able to revise their applications to take advantage of that. There's more iPad apps available that might be able to sort of port their iPadness to the phone. I think that Android has real problems in there for a lot of reasons that Apple doesn't. But watching video is an area that Apple can't control. I don't think an unfolded foldable iPhone will be as good a video viewing device as even an iPad mini, let alone a full-size iPad.
Yeah. I think it'll be fascinating, as you've said many times, to see what trade-offs, what levers Apple pulls and what levers they push, if you will, and to see where this goes. I'm excited, though, and as Marco said earlier, I think Apple trying new things is good. I'm mostly a fan of the Vision Pro. I think there's problems and foibles, and Marco, I'm sure you're happy to jump in and explain some of them if you'd like.
All right. I've well covered it, I think.
I'm a fan of the Vision Pro. And I think that whether or not you, the listener, are a fan of the Vision Pro, I think we should all celebrate that they're trying something. And this is what Marco was saying earlier. And I'm really interested to see what they try here. And not trying anything is one potential answer or option, but I think they will try something, and I think it will be sooner rather than later. And I think it's going to be really interesting and exciting. Same thing with the iPhone Air, or whatever it's called. I'm excited for them to try something super thin. And let me tell you, I still to a degree, miss my Motorola Razr from the early aughts, or maybe it was mid aughts. That thing was so small and so thin for the time that it seemed impossible. And, I'm sitting here telling you, I don't want an iPhone Air because I don't want to compromise cameras. But man, if it's as cool looking as I suspect it may be, it's going to be tough. It's going to be tough, but we'll see what happens.
So what do you think about, I know we sort of ran through it a little bit here, but what do you think about the gigantic 18-inch folding iPad thing? Because that, I think, is a product without much precedent in the market, mostly because Android tablets aren't particularly possible. And I know there's that we mentioned it in the other story. Like there's laptops that are like that, essentially Windows laptops that are one big giant screen that you fold. But even those, I think, are not of the sizes being rumored here. What is that? Is that just like random stuff Apple's doing internally? Is that a real product? Is that a MacBook Pro with a screen keyboard, which you used to make jokes about the butterfly keyboard days, that they're just going to make it all screen and you open it up and there'll be a software keyboard? Like what is that product? And do you find that kind of product enticing in any way, in the same way that you might a foldable phone?
I mean, I think the problem with that is, like, does iPad OS allow enough utility to take advantage of that larger size, first of all, and then to be worth carrying it and paying for it and all these other, so, every device you add to your life has costs. You have to, first of all, monetary costs are huge. Like, you have to buy these things, and iPads are already, the high end of iPads are already very expensive.
That's double the screen size.
Right, exactly. And add all this, crazy folding stuff that's going to be, very cutting edge, and, that's definitely going to impact costs in very large ways. So, a huge folding iPad, that's going to cost a lot. That's going to have a lot of utility to people to make it worth the money cost alone, let alone the cost of carrying it around. Where does this go in your life physically? Does it replace a laptop? Maybe not. There's a lot of, is it a desktop device? In which case, why does it need to fold? There's all sorts of questions here. I mean, but again, I'm glad Apple's trying these things. But I think this is possibly going to be an area where Apple's hardware prowess for the iPad family is as always kind of waiting for the software side of iPad land to provide more utility to more people.
Unless it's a Mac. Again, it's not yet clear what operating system this is running. If it runs Mac OS, and it's basically like the M7 MacBook Pro Fold, and that's the thing that I'm thinking about is okay, I can see that product. You don't have all the problem. You have to make Mac OS be touch-based, but who knows? Maybe they're doing that in the big redesign. We'll see. Anyway, assuming you sort that out, what is the utility? And I know there's Windows laptops that do this already. What is the utility of having the keyboard part of your laptop essentially be replaced by a screen? Well, one of the utilities is that if you pick it up and unfold it and it has a kit stand, you can have a much bigger screen, and then you just bring a portable keyboard, an iPad type keyboard with you. So it's it folds up in your backpack, but when you're setting up at a table, instead of having to look at a 13-inch screen or a 15-inch screen, you can look at basically a 19-inch screen or a 20-inch screen. But when you fold it up, it's the size of a 13-inch laptop. When you don't have it folded that way, do you want to use a software keyboard on the screen part that's laying on your desk?
Nope.
When it's just open as a regular laptop? I don't want to use a screen keyboard like that. So I don't know if that compromise is going to really be worth it for anybody. Like if you really, really need a portable computer with a 20-inch screen, I mean, they sell 20-inch laptops, I guess, but they're huge. Like it's just so difficult for me to see, like, what problem is this solving? Is someone out there right now and they're saying, well, I really hate working on my laptop. I wish I had a screen that was, 5 inches bigger diagonally. And in exchange for that, I'll give up my hardware keyboard most of the time. I don't know. This is such a fascinating rumor because it doesn't make sense to me as an iPad product, and it also doesn't make sense to me as a Mac product. But maybe I haven't seen the vision yet.
Yeah, I mean that's the thing. Like it would be very specialized. Like, this would not be mass market because it's like, honestly, I think the high end iPad Pro is already somewhat specialized, merely for price reasons alone. And once you start going, I'm sure this would definitely be above $2,000. And possibly even above that, and you start looking at like, okay, well, who is such an iPad power user that they would be willing to spend that and carry that around and have all the trade-offs that comes with that? It's like, I mean, those people do exist. They sell the Mac Pro. Like they, it's probably a smaller market than the people who buy the Mac Pro. But
the problem with the iPad Pro, folks, is a lot of those high-end ones like use it as like a graphics tablet with the pencil, and now the crease concerns come into sharp focus because try drawing on a screen that has like a subtle crease down the whole center of it. Oh, that'll be real annoying.
Yeah, I mean that's why like this I think is even much more of a moonshoot than a foldable phone.
A moonshoot?
Moonshot?
Moonshot.
Yeah.
Okay.
We'll try not to make that the title. No promises.
Cool. Anyway, this is so much more of a risk than the foldable iPhone because the foldable iPhone, we already see foldable phones out there that have high utility, that are worth their price to a lot of people. I don't think we've ever seen a device like this kind of dual screen laptop thing, or I don't think we've ever seen anything like that had any success whatsoever in any market.
Yeah, I don't think I have a place in my life at all for a giant iPad. And I know that there are people that very much want this. And, I'm happy for them. I mean, it's just, I don't think I want that in my life. Now, if this was a foldable Mac, that has at least piqued my interest. But as you said, John, I do not want to type on a screen regularly. Like a little bit, tiny bit here and there on an iPad or Mac-sized device, sure. But regularly, not for me.
It's like revenge of the touch bar, Like you didn't like me and you banished me from your laptop. So guess what? I'm back and now I'm taking up that whole section of the laptop. It's all screen. It's all just a giant touch bar. How you like me now?
We are brought to you this week by Wildgrain. Wildgrain is the first bake from frozen subscription box for artisanal breads, pastries, and pastas. Wildgrain's boxes are fully customizable to your tastes and dietary restrictions. In addition to their classic variety box, they recently launched a new gluten-free box and a plant-based box that's 100% vegan. Best of all, they take the hassle out of baking, since all the items bake from frozen in about 25 minutes or less with no mess and no cleanup. So they sent me a whole bunch of different things, and let me tell you, every fall, the family typically goes to a particular apple orchard over in Charlottesville. And this orchard, like many, makes apple cider donuts. And they are to die for. The very first thing I saw when I opened the Wildgrain box was apple cider donuts. And I immediately cooked them up, and they reminded me immediately of my beloved orchard donuts. They are extremely tasty. And that's just one example. We also got some croissants, some tear-apart pecan rolls, some chocolate chip cookies, some spaghetti, and we even got a sourdough loaf. We don't need to worry about a starter and maintaining it or anything like that. We just got a loaf that we cooked from frozen, and it was delicious. In fact, Declan immediately asked for more. He liked it so much. So, are you ready to bring all of your favorite carbs right to your doorstep? Be sure to check out Wildgrain so you can begin building your own box of artisanal breads, pastas, and pastries. For a limited time, Wildgrain is offering our listeners $30 off their first box, plus free croissants in every box. Every box when you go to wildgrain.com/ATP to start your subscription. That's right. Free croissants in every box and $30 off your first box when you go to wildgrain.com/ATP. That's WILDGRAIN.com/ATP, or you can just use promo code ATP at checkout. Thank you to Wildgrain for sponsoring the show. All right, you want to do some Ask ATP?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right, let's start off this week with Anonymous, who writes, it seems like everyone likes to rail on Apple feedback for lack of transparency, but it isn't just Apple. Anyone who's ever sent feedback or a suggestion knows the pain of the feedback black hole. My suggestions and bug reports for Overcast, Callsheet, and even Widgetsmith have gone to DevNull. Should users have any expectation of support? What is one thing you would want your customers to know about support? And then additionally, Tony writes, how do you all as individual developers deal with feedback or bug reports for your applications? For each of you, what is your preferred method of receiving feedback? How do you triage the issues reported or enhancement requests? What systems and or applications do you use to do so? Do you target a specific cadence for bug fix releases? How do you prioritize bug fixes with feature enhancements? This is a lot of questions. One ask ATP, Tony. I'd be interested to know how each of you deal with such things since your apps vary in size, complexity, and platform. For me, I don't think that's a fair comparison to compare the operations of single individuals to one of, if not the richest company on the planet. Like that's a very false equivalence. And I do understand what Anonymous is saying, but for what it's worth, I would say whenever I am sent a question about Callsheet, I typically try to answer it. And if I'm sent like a bug report or suggestion, I note it. And to answer Tony's question, if it's something I think is actionable, I'll put that, I'll make a new GitHub issue for it and I will track it. But I just, if all I did was work on support, I would never advance the app. But that's because it's just me. Again, it's just me. There's not time in the day for me to treat support the way I wish I could treat it. I wish I had the time to be able to treat it with the respect that I want to, but I just don't. And I got to assume that, Marco, you feel even more strongly the same way.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of differences here. I mean, number one, yes, it is a massive question of scale. and you know, to be brutally honest, there's also a question of lifetime customer value versus the time it's going to take, and you know, what is it worth? How much of our time is worth trying to like handhold one person through a problem? You know, when you look at like traditional what we consider support, typically that can range from I have a quick question and I could type out a 4-word reply, or more frequently, I have a long thing that's going to take you a while to read and understand, and then you might have to do some work to answer it, and then that's going to cost, that's going to take you a half hour or something. And then when you look at the maximum lifetime value that you're likely to earn from that customer, the more of those emails you spend that kind of time on, the more you are losing money. People, I think, develop a sense of customer support based on products and services in their life that they're paying a lot more for, frankly. If you have a problem with your cable service, well, you're giving them $80 a month. The lifetime value of you as a customer is pretty high to them, so they can afford to have somebody answering your questions for you. When you're, looking at an app that you got for free, or maybe you're paying a few bucks a year for, that's a lot harder for that developer to be able to afford to walk you through things or to answer questions individually one by one. So there is that significant difference in scale and in just plain old dollars and cents. And as Casey said, as one person, there's a total amount of time that we have to spend on work every day. And when you are answering individual emails, that is not a great way to leverage the limited time that you have. You're better off kind of taking all the emails as an input and saying, a lot of people are finding this button confusing or whatever. Let me fix that design. And then you make the product better for everyone, and that's kind of an indirect way to fix it. Is it ideal? No. Obviously it'd be great if we had time and resources to answer everything the way it deserves to be answered. But when you're dealing with individual one-person types of businesses where they stand to make very little money from each person and they have a lot of emails, that it is not a great use of their time to provide individual support. So the way I, kind of squared this in my head is I set expectations accordingly in the app. That I think is very important. It'd be one thing if you said, email me with any questions you have. Come on, I'll answer them, and then you never did. That's kind of crappy. And if you look at the Apple feedback system and what we are told about it, the problem we have with it is that we are repeatedly told over and over again by lots of people on Apple, you have to file bugs. Please, it makes a big difference. They really do matter. And then, the reaction we get when we actually do file bugs is crickets, and it's the system shows us it's wasting our time. Whereas I think what I'm doing by not responding to most emails to Overcast, I think it's different because I'm setting the expectation right up front, right in the app, right where the email form is. I'm saying I will read most emails, but will not respond to most of them because I don't have time to respond to most of them. So I'm setting the expectation before you've even emailed me, and you can, of course, get to that screen before you've paid me a dime. I'm setting right there in the app, I'm probably not going to respond to your email. And so I think, again, in a perfect world, yeah, everybody would have time to respond to everybody, and everybody would get what they want. In the actual world that we're in as indie businesses, where we can't afford to respond to every single thing and give people the support that they sometimes want, I think the best way to handle that, is expectation setting, so that people are told right up front before they've invested a bunch of time, going through your process. You can say, hey, you know what? I'm probably not going to respond. And they can choose. They can say, all right, you know what? This app isn't for me then. And sometimes I will tell people who get very mad at me, sometimes I'll say, listen, it sounds like you want a level of support that I can't provide, so you should probably use a different app that provides what you want. And I'm fine with that trade-off. I know that not everybody is willing to accept my point of view on this. and for those people who demand a more engaged developer or team behind their apps, there's other apps out there that offer that. And I accept the reality that I'm going to lose those people to those apps. That's fine. I accept that. To me, I've made that cost benefit analysis and decided I'm not going to change the way I operate my entire business for what seems to be a fairly small percentage of the audience that really can't take the way I do it.
Yeah, the thing I'd add is I would imagine when people hear us give our usual answer to this is well, Apple's the biggest company in the world and has billions of dollars, and we're individual people. They might think to themselves, okay, but also Apple has way more customers than you. So doesn't it all even out? Because they may be huge, but literally billions of people own their products. So it seems like it should be the same. And this is what I would say. If you are an individual developer, you don't have a company, you don't have any employees you're hiring to do support or anything, it's just a single person. If you are successful enough with your app sales for it to be any kind of reasonable income or any kind of reasonable augment to your income, if you make maybe not enough money to just live off your app, but enough money that it's not just pocket change, you're really helping support the household with your app, that means that you have too many customers to support individually. So the ratio, if you are even remotely successful as an individual, you have too many customers that you can't spend your time responding to them. There's no business unless you sell you sell an app for $50,000 and you sell 2 copies of it or something. There's no business that you can have as an individual where the number of customers is tractable, where you do have time to give people individual support, and also that your business is successful. Because if you have an app and 2 people download it, you can spend all day emailing with those 2 people and supporting them at a very personal basis. But 2 customers is not enough to support you unless your app is tremendously expensive. So, and I know because I'm usually on the other side of that, because I have 3 apps now. They are not particularly successful, which means that I don't have that many customers, which means when customers email me, they're much more likely to get a response. And it's not because I'm nicer than Marco and Casey. It's because I have fewer customers.
And you're also nicer.
The opposite problem, right?
Yeah, you're also nicer.
Yeah, but this is the real thing, right? And but still, even with the amount of customers that I have to make the same exact trade-offs, which is, some customers who email me about apps, they gave me $5 once 5 years ago, and I've spent just dozens and dozens of hours going back and forth over the course of months helping them debug a problem. Why am I doing that? Is it out of the goodness of my heart? No, because one of the things that you have to do as an independent developer is, like Marco was saying, figure out how best to spend your time. And if there's some problem and some bug that never happens to you that you can't reproduce, but that some portion of your customer base has, if you get one person who contacts you about that bug and they're willing to be like your remote debugging buddy, the time you spend with them is going to pay dividends for all your other customers and maybe for a future version of your app or whatever. you're spending a lot of time with them not to help solve their problem, but because that person is helping solve a problem that lots of other people have experienced. And it's basically the interactive version of what Margaret was talking about is like, if you take your feedback in aggregate, you can figure out where the pain points are and concentrate on them. But if you're trying to find a problem, like, oh, I know this is a problem on my app, I can't debug it because it never happens to me, but I know it's happening to customers out there. What you need is like one hero to come through and like someone who is just, they want to get it figured out too. Why are they doing it? That's not their app. They're not going to benefit from this bug being fixed. Or maybe they just want to participate in bug fixing. And I treasure those people because sometimes you need just one person out there who's got a problem, who's going to pull the logs for you and go back and forth and figure it out. And then you figure out like, what is the problem? Why does this not happen to most people, but it happens to some people? And you just narrow it down. And that's the trade-off that I do with all of my feedback. It's like, if it's a 2-word answer, fine. If it's just, if it's 17 pages of me trying to debug their entire life, they're just not going to get a response at all. But if I know there's some problem somewhere, or there's some issue or whatever, like in Switchglass, I had such problems with like screen identification of like, figuring out which screen is this for a variety of both hardware and software based reasons. Hardware having to do with like identical monitors, lying about their serial numbers, and software having to do with how Apple exposes which monitor is which. And this is like a core functionality of my app, assign a different palette, Switchglass thing to each individual screen. And you want it to always remember, this is the screen on my left and this is the screen on my right. And from a user's perspective, you're like, how dumb is this app? I can't tell this is the screen on my left and this is the screen on my right. But from a software perspective, it's like, I don't know where your screens are, man. I just got to call APIs and hope I get IDs back. And getting someone who could debug that with me, like, what screens do you have? Can you take a picture of the back of your screens? Can you run this test program for me that dumps a bunch of information from the IO registry? And like, that really helped me fix some problems early on in Switchglass. And all the Switchglass users benefited from that problem being solved. So yeah, like a lot of people, especially listening to the show, they think like apps are just like a fun thing or like a privilege to be able to make them. And that is all true. But like Marco said, it is also a business, or in my case, attempting to be a business. And so you have to think like a business person and budget your time and money wisely. And sometimes that means massively over-engaging with 1 or 2 people. And sometimes that means ignoring a whole bunch of them. And sometimes it means figuring out what you have to do to improve your app so that you actually do get more customers. So then you have so many that you have to ignore them. It's not easy being an indie developer. It's trade-offs all the way down. But anyway, all I just want to say is that the trope about Apple is big and we're small, so we should be excused, even acknowledging that they also have more customers, the math just still doesn't work, because to become successful as an individual, you have too many customers to support. And there's this gap, by the way, when you have enough customers to be significant, but before you have enough customers to hire a support person. There's this gap where it's like, we really should hire a support person, but we can't because we don't have enough customers. And eventually you get enough customers that you can hire someone and should hire someone to do support for you. But I don't think any of us have really passed that threshold. So yeah, business is tricky.
Tom Bullock writes, in big corporate software, it's often said that big bang releases are bad and small incremental releases are good. They're good for the company, certainly, and you might be able to argue that they're good for users in terms of avoiding a huge deluge of new bugs at once. As Apple has also moved this direction in the past few years, it makes me wonder, what about delight as a user priority? The experience of going to a new major version and having a bunch of cool new features spring to life now seems diminished, since all the features are sprinkled out over the year. It makes me wonder whether we've traded away something important in order to get more stability. I hear Tom's point, but I think I prefer it this way. I like having incremental releases, and we're actually going to talk about something that I'm going to be releasing real soon in the after show. But it doesn't mean Tom is wrong by any stretch. But I kind of like the status quo. I don't know, John. What's the right answer here?
Yeah, so are we missing out on delight as a priority? Like the experience of having a cool new, a big new version with cool new features in it. The thing about the like big bang releases and like just a release where you change a whole bunch of stuff is that is not a formula for delight for the end user, really. That is a formula for you broke tons of stuff that worked before and all the new things you rolled out are buggy. There's the essay from Joel Spolsky from 2000 talking about things you should never do, part 1, quoting from that. Netscape made the single worst strategic mistake that any software company can make. They decided to rewrite the code from scratch. As developers, we all know that instinct. Oh, look at all this code. It's cruddy. It's cruft, tech debt. It's built up. It needs to be redone. Let's redo it all. That is sometimes a good instinct, but the right way to do that is still in incremental pieces with the goal of eventually replacing it all and doing important parts first or whatever. But you can't do all that work internally and just like say, oh, we're working right here and we won't release until we've rewritten everything from scratch. And then one day we'll have the old thing and the next day we'll swap out the old thing and put in the new thing. Just ask Sonos if this is a formula for
sick burn.
delight. But it's not just Sonos. Like, it's so hard to do that and not end up angering more people than you delight, because the old code has all the bug fixes in it and all the wisdom of all the people who've left the company. You can read the Joel Spolsky article. Like, that's why it's accepted wisdom that you shouldn't give in fully to the desire to just wipe the slate clean and start over, unless you've made the wrong app, in which case make a new app or whatever. Like, obviously doing a pivot or going in a new direction or whatever. Like, there are ways that this can work. That's one of the things that I hated about the Spolsky article back in 2000. I'm like, but this is wrong. There are cases when you should do this. But his larger point was like, and he didn't hedge about this, which is what you didn't hedge back in the 2000s when you were a blogger. Anyway, you should never, ever do this. That's the wrong lesson. The lesson is you will want to do this more than you should. That's the lesson. That's the sort of like more accurate, less sensational early 2000s blogger thing. We know you want to do this, especially if you're a programmer, but you should resist that and only do it in careful ways under certain circumstances, yada, yada, yada. And that is a very boring blog post to read, so it's much better to say this is the single worst mistake you should make. You should never, ever do it. And as evidenced by 25 years later, people will still quote this article and say, well, Joel Spolsky said you should never do it, therefore you should never do it. There are cases where you should do it. Maybe Siri should be rewritten, but it's so much more prevalent. It's so much more desirable. It is so hard to resist that you should generally not do it. And it's because rewrites like that do not delight your users. They don't delight you either. Everyone is sad. Everything breaks. Stuff that used to exist doesn't exist anymore. All the new stuff you rolled out isn't as good as you thought, and it's all buggy as hell. And you sign yourself up for another decade of finding and fixing bugs that you already found and fixed before you get to the point where you can find and fix the bugs and the new stuff you added. So I disagree with this questioner. We are not missing out on anything. If anything, Apple should be more judicious with the features it rolls out, and maybe more judicious with the features it announces, because the real way to surprise and delight users is to take the features they know and love and use every day and make them better and better and better over time. Polish them, remove long-standing bugs, make the performance better. Like, just people use features every single day, day in, day out. Make those better. That's how you delight users.
Also, I mean, in all fairness, I think Tom's question here, it isn't just about like big rewrites. I think it's more about like the features that we're already delivering. Instead of staging them out like on every 18.1, 18.2, 18.3, like having each one of those deliver a chunk of what was announced at WWDC, instead like have the one big release in the fall deliver everything that was supposed to be in that OS major version, as opposed to like month by month by month. So there is certainly a question of whether dropping everything all at once in a big bang is better, and in certain ways that is better. That is definitely better for making a big splash in marketing if it's hard for you to get a lot of attention otherwise. So like, it isn't hard for Apple to get attention. Apple can, fart and they'll get attention from all the major press outlets, so they can do whatever they want. They can stage stuff out, and when you have that kind of status, it's actually good to trickle things out, because then you kind of stay in the press constantly. There's always something that you are doing that's new in the press. Whereas,
although I don't think that's why Apple does it, because Apple used to do the thing where all the OS features were supposed to launch in the 0.0. But I think that there was a reason the 0.0s were just way buggier. Like, they used to release features that were at the same doneness state as the ones they don't release now, but they just released them anyway. And guess what? In the 0.0, it was buggy. In the 0.2, some bugs were fixed. In the 0.3, some bugs were fixed. In the 0.4, it finally worked. Now they just hold it for the 0.4, which I think is the right decision, because I think the Big Bang release, despite us being excited by seeing it at WWDC, like, ooh, we're all going to get this as soon as the 0.0 is out, and we're so excited for it. But when we get it, it's disappointing when the stuff is buggy as hell until the 0.3. Just hold it for the 0.3.
Yeah, but so anyway, like, if you have one strategy for marketing is trickle stuff out to constantly remind people about you. This is why you can buy like a single sock from a website once, and they will start emailing you literally every single day after that, telling you all of the breaking news in their sock specials. Before your sock even arrives, you've got 9 emails from them reminding you of all the great news happening in socks.
But you don't think that's why Apple, like marketing is not dictating that Apple holds things to the point 3, right? Like that's engineering for sure, right?
Probably, but I think Apple appreciates the benefit that it, like, I don't think they are artificially holding stuff back to trickle stuff out. You are probably right that it is engineering driven. However, I do think that this is a benefit they enjoy, that it does spread the press splash for their stuff throughout the whole year rather than just happening in the summer and fall. But when you are an indie and you don't have the kind of fart attention that Apple gets from the world with everything you do, there is some value to having those big splashes. Like when you are pretty much anybody who's smaller, even like a medium-sized company, like, if you have like Evernote, I think they're dead now, but something like that size company of like, if you can make a big 3.0 or whatever and have a whole bunch of stuff all drop at once in that one big version. And everything John just said about like, having a big release, also having a bunch of bugs, that is true. But that does get a big PR splash. So there are times where you would want that strategy for sure. But when it comes to delighting users, I mean, maybe this is just my style as a developer. My favorite ways to delight users are with small features. They might not even they might never see an announcement for it, but they might run into it in the app sometime. That is, if you're optimizing for delight, that's a little bit different from like wowing people. I think the big PR feature drops, that's to wow people and maybe get new attention to your app. But if you want to delight your users, I find it way more fun and way more delightful to offer them something helpful or nice or fun at a random time that they weren't like necessarily looking for that, but something helps them and like, oh, cool. So an example of this would be like my undo seek. This has been like when I did the big Overcast rewrite that I should never have done, thanks to Joel Spolsky. When I did the big rewrite last year, I improved so much about the app. The thing that people love the most, they constantly tell me they love the most, is undo seek. Because a lot of times it turns out people accidentally seek in a podcast by dragging the bar accidentally with their finger or whatever, and then having the undo thing pop up right there, undo seek, and you tap it and you undo it. That's a very delightful feature to people. It was not a big PR splash, but it's something that they run into when they are using the app. And as you are developing an app and serving your users over time, you can add little things like that whenever you want. And the sooner you get it in there, the sooner people are going to start being delighted by it. So I think there is a way to optimize for designing for delighting users, and it doesn't actually require big bang, big drop releases. You can do it incrementally by slowly adding that kind of thing over time.
I think the delight that Tom was asking about is like the Christmas morning feeling of like watching the announcement video and say, oh, look at all these goodies and I'm going to get all of them. And you can continue to think that and just know that they're going to space out. But it's just so nice to like, now finally I'm installing iOS N+1 because it's been publicly released and now I get everything that I saw in that video. And that's not, that was never really a realistic world. Your choices were exchange that great feeling for a buggy 0.0. Or, just have, they could just simply announce fewer features and release them all on day one and just release fewer things throughout the year. I think what they're currently doing is a reasonable-ish compromise, which is announce all the things in your big video and then release them over the course of the year. As long as over the course of the year, A, actually fits within the year, which hasn't worked out that well for Apple's intelligence stuff, and B, that you don't get like the last bushel of things in like the end of December, and it includes like really important features, like spreading it over the year. Maybe try to spread it over the first half of the year, because honestly, if you're planning features and they're taking your whole year to roll out in any reasonable form, you probably put too much into the year. But yeah, like I do think polishing existing features, and I would say the seek undo, that's an example of polishing an existing feature. Seeking, that was done in 1.0. Whatever needs to be done with seeking, but people use seeking all the time. Is there something that needs to be polished in seeking? But yeah, it works fine. Seeking is fine. Like, nothing is wrong with seeking. It's like, but let me really think about seeking. Is there any part of seeking the experience could be better? I'm going to go revisit the seeking feature, which I've never needed to touch because it works perfectly fine. And you find something to add. And guess what? People love it. Not because seeking is a new feature, not because it lets them do anything they couldn't do before, because you could always just slide it back and figure out where you were, but it makes some part of seeking better. It acknowledges the reality of seeking, which is sometimes you do it by accident. Let the app help you out there. Polishing an existing feature like that, I wish macOS had this. I wish it's so bad. Like every single thing I do every day in macOS is like, this has been this way for 10 years and has not improved. Please, just somebody work on this one feature. You know, I mean, my bugbear is like file sharing in the Finder. Those dialogues, that whole interface, that whole experience has not gotten better in so long, and I do it every single day, and I wish someone would come and give me the Finder file sharing equivalent of undo seek.
You know, bringing both these askatps together, my favorite support email to get, which I always respond to, is, hey, just FYI, you know, you have all of these ages for these actors on, you know, this movie, but they're all wrong because, you know, Pierce Brosnan isn't 35 anymore. And that's what it says he is in, you know, Goldeneye or whatever. I'm making all this up. And I get to respond and say, no. That's how old he was when it was released.
But that's a design bug, I feel like.
Yeah,
people are
actually.
misunderstanding it. You need to make that clear in the interface.
Thank you for ruining my moment, John.
I'm just saying, like, it's both. It's both. It's good that you get to delight them, but like, oh, that's really useful. And now they know that. And from that point on, they will be delighted by that aspect of your application. But also, it shows that there's a part of the application that's confusing.
Maybe put like a little tiny text above that says like then 35.
It's not an easy. If it was an easy problem to solve, you would already solved it. Like all of our apps have situations like this, which is like, how can I make this clear without cluttering up the app with a bunch of instructions that once you know it, you never need this again? Because I don't need that instruction. I know about it, but I know about it because I talked to you. Like, but if I had just seen it without any information, would I have known? This is one of the problems of app design. That are you optimizing for the first user who knows nothing, or the user after that, or do you want your application to adapt to it? You might have already made the right trade-off, which is don't put anything. And if anyone doesn't understand what it is, they'll write you and you'll tell them and they'll be happy. But, you know, it could be better.
Well, and actually, now that I think about it, I embraced TipKit just the teeniest bit when I did the big multiple lists. I almost said rewrite. It wasn't a rewrite necessarily, but the multiple list feature. And so now that I've gone down the TipKit line, for lack of a better word, you know, perhaps the right answer is to add a tip for this. So the first once or twice that they see it, they'll get the little pop-up that says, hey, this is how old these actors were when the movie was released, and then they never see it again.
And then you send you an angry email. Why is this thing popping up tips in my face? I don't need you to tell me to use my app. Get this thing out. You know, it's hard to please everybody.
I got one of those. It was so obnoxious. It was on Mastodon. It was just hilariously obnoxious.
Oh, if you want to see obnoxious, like I posted on Mastodon asking about a shopping list app or whatever, and a bunch of people sent me suggestions, most of which I already tried. But anyway, in the course of trying all of the suggestions, I saw just how aggressive like the average iOS app is about sending you BS notifications, like install the app. And I would be like, allow notifications just because like I want to see how the app works. You know, if notifications are part of the app, if I was going to use this app, I would enable notifications. So I install the app, enable notifications, use it for 2 seconds, close the app, go back to the app store. 1, 2, 3, bloop, notification from that app, instant delete. Like, I don't even know what those notifications were saying. It's like, I've barely even used your app. I just installed it like less than 60 seconds ago, and you're already sending me notifications. Like, no, no, delete. I think TipKit is way below that threshold. But yeah, apps that don't respect, you know, their intrusion into your life. Like, it's madness.
All right, thank you to our sponsors this episode, Wildgrain, Factor, and Notion. And thanks to our members who support us directly, you can join us at atp.fm/join. One of the many perks of membership is called ATP Overtime. This is our weekly bonus topic. Every episode of the show gets ATP Overtime. There's about 15 to 30 minutes usually of a whole other topic that you aren't hearing if you're not a member. So if you want to hear all these, if you just, after hearing, 2 hours of us, you're like, the one thing I need is to hear more of these people BS about computer stuff. You can join us at atp.fm/join, and you can hear Overtime every week. So this week on Overtime, the topic is going to be vibe coding, this new phrase that came up, which I find this very amusing. But anyway, vibe coding, we're going to be talking about that in Overtime this week. So you can join to listen. Once again, atp.fm/join. Thanks, everybody. Talk to you next week.
Now the show is over, they didn't even mean to begin, 'cause it was accidental. Oh, it was accidental. John didn't do any research, Marco and Casey wouldn't let him, 'cause it was accidental. Oh, it was accidental. And you can find the show notes at atp.fm. And if you're into Mastodon, you can follow them at CASEYLISS. So that's Casey Liss, MARCOARMENT, Marco Arment, SIRAC, USA Syracuse. It's accidental. They didn't mean to. Accidental. Tech podcast so long.
So, in the realm of delighting users, kind of, sort of, there's been a handful of features that Callsheet either hasn't done or hasn't done the way I want. And I'd been kicking the can down the road on a lot of these. It's in some ways because I was scared of them, in some ways because I just didn't think it was the right time, in some ways because other things were a bigger priority. The number one on the list was having multiple lists of pins. And, we've talked about that already. It launched, I think, a month ago or something like that. And another one that I probably should have prioritized higher, but honestly, I was a little scared of, was universal links and a web presence. And I don't mean like a marketing page. I still don't really have that. But what I mean is when you go to share like a movie or a show or a person in Callsheet, I present you with a prompt the way in the released version of the app that says, do you want to share, a Callsheet link, which is the Callsheet //URL scheme that only works if you have Callsheet installed on your device. Do you want to share a movie database link where you just go straight to the movie database? I feel like there might have been one other option. I don't recall, but you have the user has to make a choice. Right. And if they send a Callsheet link, like, let's say my, close friends and I share a link for a movie, what's getting sent in like an iMessage is Callsheet // in some URL, which is presented as a completely useless URL in messages. There's no web component to it whatsoever. So there's no poster, there's no title, there's no anything. I have no idea what I'm looking at other than looking at the URL and knowing if it's a movie, a show, or a person. And that kind of sucks, and it's always kind of sucked. And even leaving aside the growth hacking of like having a nice web link to point people to, it's just icky to look at in messages. Like even for people who love the app, I really like the app. And when I send these links to like Aaron or my friends or what have you, they're gross. And so what I knew I wanted to do was have some sort of universal link and like web presence such that when you share a link, instead of sharing Callsheet // you're sharing a link to some website. And then when you open that link, it will, at the very least, show a presentable version of that website that you can then, from that web page, click a link that, sends you into Callsheet. Or for double bonus points, you open that URL, say from messages, and it immediately hops you right into Callsheet, deep links you to the particular, thing that you were looking at. So as an example, if I sent to the two of you the link to the Hunt for Red October in iMessage, I would expect to see the poster for the Hunt for Red October. I would expect to see the title. I would expect that if you tap on that link, we would open Callsheet and dive directly to the Hunt for Red October. And on the surface, this shouldn't be that complicated, but the complicated thing was and slightly because of Marco, but mostly because of me, I have a deep aversion to running any sort of server component at all for any of my apps.
Wise.
I don't want to bother with it. I don't want to mess with it. I don't want to deal with it. I don't want to scale it. I don't want to think of it. So that's a large part of the reason why I've been kicking this can. And the obvious answer is, well, you dum-dum, you already run a server for your website. Just tack on the side of that. And yeah, I could, but like my website is old and creaky. See the recent member special. And although it works perfectly for the needs I have of it today, I think extending it for this purpose is not really the right idea. So then I need to like stand up a whole new thing. And do I want to stand up an entire new like Linode, Nanode, and another VM in the cloud somewhere just to service this? And like, ugh,
Yes.
I don't. No, I don't.
Okay, well, I think yes, but anyway.
I don't. And so I just kept kicking this can down the road, and I kicked it and I kicked it and I kicked it and I kicked it. And then lo and behold, and this is the lesson that Marco and I have both learned many times and keep trying to unlearn and then keep getting reinforced that we should continue to do it. Procrastination has saved the day. And so an extremely kind listener who I did not get blessings to use their name one way or the other, so I'll just call them Josh S. An extremely kind listener late last year said, hey, I'm tired of sending links to people for Callsheet that are so hideous. So I stood up my own little baby setup that does it for you. And so what Josh had done was had set up, I forget exactly where he had put it. I want to say it was on Cloudflare, but I'm not 100% certain. And basically these were single serving pages, sort of kind of. And what it would do is it would mimic the Callsheet //URLs, but it was an actual website, right? And it used the movie database's API on the client side to load details about the film or the show or what have you. So you get this really nice landing page for the Hunt for October, and it has the poster, and the background of the page is like a faded out like image from the movie. And it was just really, really good. And I don't have the link in front of me, and I don't want to swamp his setup, and I don't know how long it's going to last anyway, but it was incredible. And I immediately reached out and was like, holy crap, may I steal this, please? And again, procrastination to save the day. And Josh was extremely gracious and courteous about it. And was like, yeah, absolutely steal it. Have fun. And that was months ago. Well, over the last week, I finally decided to get off my butt and actually try to implement this. And this, to make this a little broader and not all about me, I feel like I learned a really good lesson from this experience, because I knew I didn't want to listen to John and stand up a new, VM in the cloud. I wanted to do something serverless, which is a buzzword that I've heard more in the past a little bit, not as much recently, but I've heard plenty of times. And I don't really even know what that means, but I know that it means I don't have to deal with like a full-on server.
I mean, surely somebody's servers are running these.
Sure.
Yeah, so
You're exactly right.
That's what I was getting at when I said, yes, you want to do that. Because I wanted you to have a website. But like what you're talking about now is an implementation detail, which is like, okay, what answers? When I make an HTTP request, what is on the other end of this thing answering my question? And it could be a computer in a rack somewhere. It could be a virtual machine inside a computer in a rack somewhere. Or it could be a quote unquote serverless endpoint, which is a bunch of software running on a computer inside a rack somewhere. But it does change like your perspective in that, like, am I responsible for running a machine? Am I responsible for like instantiating and running a VM, or am I not responsible for any of that? And instead, my responsibility begins and ends with me uploading a blob of code or an executable into this magic bucket, and then I'm not responsible for anything that runs it. And the only thing that can be my fault is there's a bug in the code that I uploaded, so I should upload a new version of it. Bingo. But everything else is essentially not my fault, and that is what it sounds like you're looking for. That is the quote-unquote serverless, is like, I don't want any of this to be my responsibility. But there are other trade-offs with quote-unquote serverless, which have to do with things that aren't your problem may become your problem if there's something, like you can't fix them if there's a problem, so you want it to be reliable, and also surprisingly costs. Sometimes serverless can save you huge amounts of money depending on what you're doing. If what you're doing is, let's say, extremely simple and low traffic, putting it as a tiny little thing on some existing VM you have could save you more money than paying per request to a serverless thing. So I get you wanting to do it because it's like cool and you haven't tried it before and you should check it out. And it might be the best choice for what you're doing, but also it might end up being way more expensive than putting a static page on the cheapest static hosting you could find.
Yeah. And you hit the nail on the head that I wanted to leverage as much of somebody else's infrastructure as possible and just care about the thing I actually care about. And I think, I'm stealing a little bit of Marco's thunder, so to speak, in that you've said this many times, I believe, Marco, and summarized it probably better than I'm about to, in that, our value add is probably working on the native app, and being a Linux administrator is not really what you or me or John is, well, maybe John, but not what Marco and I are meant to do. And so I don't want to do that for this particular context. And so I decided to bite the bullet. That's probably a terrible turn of phrase. I decided to learn how to do this. And what I ended up doing was looking at Cloudflare pages, which from what very little I know, and I'm sure I'm going to get some things factually wrong here, but the gist is that you can send them static HTML, or you can use some very, very, very basic, I guess, web frameworks to do very, very, very basic websites. I think this is kind of spiritually similar to GitHub. What is it? GitHub Pages? GitHub something or other, that they'll host a website for you as well. It's Cloudflare's cut of that. But the problem is that I wanted this to be dynamic, and I'm putting huge air quotes in there, insofar as I don't want to have to, and I don't have any mechanism really, of sending all the data to this page. Like I could send a title as like query string or whatever, but that would look ugly. And how am I going to send an image? What am I going to base 64 encode an image and put that in a URL? Like, that's gross. That's not at all what I want. So what this website / web page or what have you would need to do is make its own request to the movie database and get the data it needs based on just an identifier. And that's what I did. And so it turns out Cloudflare Pages also uses or offers Cloudflare functions, which I guess in turn are just like slightly rejiggered versions of Cloudflare workers, which all of that is to say you can basically push HTML and JavaScript to Cloudflare. And as long as they're not super intensive, and as long as you're not getting a gazillion hits, it's, as far as I know, it is literally free for me to host this so far. I haven't paid for an SSL cert, which I know is not that common anymore. I already paid for the domain like a year and a half ago, but I'm not paying for hosting yet. Obviously, there could change, and I might need to, I might get so much traffic that I need to start paying them. But the free limits are extremely generous. I don't remember offhand what they are, but they're very, very generous. And now you can go to callsheetapp.com/movie/1669 as an example, and you can see The Hunt for October. And you can do that for people. You can do it for TV shows. You can do it for TV shows, TV show seasons, and TV show episodes. And I'm really, really pleased with this. And the look and feel of it is 98% Josh S. I did change a couple of things here and there, but the overwhelming majority of it was Josh. The JavaScript, again, make air quotes, backend code, so to speak, most of that was Josh. Again, I tweaked it and changed it and so on and so forth. But what I think a couple of big lessons for me that may be relevant to everyone, I guess I'm trying to channel under the radar here a little bit. First of all, this was something I deeply feared, and I was able to put it together in a few days. Similarly, I deeply feared lists of pins, and that took longer. But as it turns out, for both of these, I was capable of it. Like, I didn't think I was, but I was. And I think what I need to take from this, and maybe someone else listening is in a similar position, like, I've been doing this for a long time. I shouldn't doubt myself the way I have been on a couple of these things. Like, normally everyday stuff, I've got that, no problem. But some of the stuff where I'm outside of my comfort zone, I don't need to be doubting myself as much as I do. And I'm pretty decent at my job, and I can figure stuff out. Like, as I've said probably on the show before, and I've said certainly in many times in the past, when I went to school, and I think I speak for all of you probably, when I went to school, I did learn some marketable skills, but ultimately what I learned was how to learn. And I can learn things, and I knew this intellectually, but I don't know, for whatever reason, I just got so scared about this, and I didn't need to be. And then I was able to put all this web stuff together. Again, thanks so much to Josh S. And then I was able to, again, thanks to some tutelage from him, get it so that when you open these URLs, if the app is installed, it will automatically deep link into the app, which was not challenging, but was something I'd never done before. You have to get, a certain file on the web server in a certain spot. And Marco's probably done all this 15 times, but you put a certain website or a certain page or a certain file, on the web server in a certain spot. Then you got to report into Apple about, what domain do you bless, and does the blessed domain does the domain bless you back, and so on and so forth. But ultimately, I have feared this for months, probably a year and a half now, and I ended up conquering it in just a few days. So if you're in a position where there's something, be it a work issue or a programming issue or a life issue that you've been fearing, stop kicking that can. Don't be like me. Don't procrastinate, except when it's useful, but don't procrastinate and just give it a shot, because you'd be surprised what you're capable of. And I'm sure there's problems with this. I'm sure someone will find a bug, and I'm sure there will be an issue, but ultimately it's there, and at least in the happy path it works. And I'm really pleased with it. And the best part of all, gentlemen, is if I need to change something, I change it, I upload it, and I wait about 15 seconds, and then it's live, which is so frigging refreshing. And I know that this is so obvious, but I'm so used to living in native app land where even a test flight takes like 10, 15 minutes to go through. I am so loving the world of the web where when I upload something, I wait a minute and then it's live, and it's delightful.
Some listener out there is very upset that we've had this entire conversation and not once said the phrase AWS Lambda. So now we've said it, so you can all exhale.
That's true. And, I know that there are plenty of other technologies that would work for this. I don't know why I chose Cloudflare, to be honest with you. I just had heard of it
Sounds
many
like
times.
They have a cheap deal.
Yeah. And I mean, that's the other thing. Is like AWS scares the piss out of me, because there's so much to it. There's so many nooks and crannies that I know almost nothing about any of them. Plus, it seems like so much of the terminology is so like domain specific that I would just not even, I would take so long for me to even understand the terminology I needed to ask the question that I don't think I would ever turn to AWS. Now, John, if I recall correctly, you have plenty of experience with AWS. So maybe for you, if you were to go down this route and if you wanted quote unquote serverless, maybe you would jump directly to AWS and AWS Lambda.
No, because like AWS as the market leader is not incentivized to offer as generous a free plan as you seem to be experiencing from Cloudflare. So I will never be at the scale where AWS will make the most sense for me, I would imagine. Marco probably already is at that scale, and we've discussed that many times in the past, but it is terrifying. You are right to be scared. And that's the sort of competitive niche that like companies like Fastly and Cloudflare, like they are able to offer services that are aimed at people like you, like people who are potential customers of many of their services and may eventually pay for them, but right now aren't like need a kind of a user-friendly on-ramp and maybe don't have a lot of traffic to begin with, and they want to get those because they're below the concern of AWS.